This central character is essentially web-slinger alongside Sung Jinwoo, and I can substantiate it. Although his true form is confined within a research facility, he forges authentic personas such as Esper, Exorcist, and Herald of Legends. The most astonishing aspect is that, depending on the character he assumes control of, that class instantly transforms into the one with the highest potential in existence. In other terms, he is not confined to a single category. He is the pinnacle among all of them. He navigates the metropolis on strands while grappling with his obligations, then calls forth a legion of troops and directs them at his discretion. In summary, this series is utterly remarkable. Now, let's begin with the footage. In a wholly ravaged realm, numerous individuals sprawled motionless on the floor. Only a single young man continued to stride forward, rather perplexed by the happenings surrounding him, curious about what had transpired with him and if he had undeniably been accountable for everything, as he had never desired any of this. Becoming progressively frightened, the lad started to quiver, still unable to comprehend what had genuinely transpired. Without warning, an intense energy commenced to rise above his influence, and he awoke in terror. He rested a hand on his neck, coming to the realization that he had encountered the same haunting dream once more. Abruptly, a voice resonated within his chamber, declaring that he was designated as Restricted Class Individual number 1002, known as Jai Ming Hyun, and that his mentor had arrived. Thus, he required to ready himself at the earliest opportunity. The educator entered the chamber and cautioned the main character that he must recognize that, regarding imminent dangers, they invariably opted for direct eradication. This implied that not all individuals in that location would exhibit the same level of tolerance towards the protagonist as he was demonstrating. Consequently, the earlier Ming Hyun comprehended the perilous nature of his capability and collaborated with his responsibilities. The more advantageous it would be, as it would lead to fewer complications down the line. Nonetheless, the main character still did not fully grasp, as he had been abducted from the children's home and confined within that shadowy location, while everyone incessantly warned him about how perilous his gift was. Consequently, it would be immensely beneficial if they could clarify what talent he had, as even he was unaware of its nature. The educator maintained that their evaluations had always been accurate, and that the main character fell into the most perilous classification category globally, possessing the capability to annihilate the entire planet. Moreover, the educator had posed multiple inquiries at the children's home where he had resided and uncovered that when the main character was merely a young boy, he adored isolating himself and enveloping his whole form in bathroom tissue. This was exactly the reason the other kids referred to him as an oddity. He had additionally learned from the guardians that, during Ming Hyun's residence there, he delighted in stealthily entering the computer room to engage in playing video games. The educator inquired if all of that was accurate, as that was precisely the reason he had arrived to converse with him that day. Ming Hyun asserted that if he genuinely desired to uncover all the truths, he merely needed to be released from that location, after which he would divulge anything he wished to know. The teacher inhaled deeply. However, based on the examinations they had performed, the central character was probably a user of reality-altering abilities. Given his passion for gaming, it was quite likely that his powers would emerge in a game-related manifestation, evolving into a scenario crafted to challenge and direct him, while assisting him in comprehending how to wield that ability effectively. Ming Hyun started to exhaust his patience and inquired if his mentor was nothing more than an automaton designed to monotonously converse with himself repeatedly. The educator recognized that the main character might still be unclear about his present circumstances, so he suggested that they could conclude their discussion for the day. Ming Hyun requested his mentor to hold on and underscore that he was fully aware of his present circumstances, that he had already been confined within that location for a complete month, and inquired when he would be permitted to depart. The teacher responded that if he conducted himself as a well-mannered child and earnestly engaged with their efforts, he might have the opportunity to depart once he matured. The main character distinctly comprehended the unfolding events. This implied that his prospects of ever escaping that laboratory were virtually non-existent, or that by the time he was ultimately allowed to depart, he would be nothing but a lifeless body scarcely able to blink. Enraged, he struck the pane, prompting fissures to extend throughout its entire exterior, and a display screen manifested, greeting player number 1. The glass broke effortlessly, yet he was conveyed to an alternate reality. He recalled that his mentor had mentioned his talent might manifest as a game, and considered that this could be his capability. The system declared that it was initializing the game Infinite Division, and initiated the character development phase. He was an Esper, one of the 3 extraordinary races. Each Esper held a distinct capability whose expression was intricately linked to their life experiences and personal development. Gu Wenyu, now 17 years of age, had all his fundamental attributes classified as C. His history indicated that he resided in the capital of the Dragon Nation and was a local pupil of Jing. One evening, he unexpectedly activated a power, acquiring the ability to generate and manipulate dark binding bands. From that moment forward, he began to uncover that the family he had cohabited with for over a decade appeared to be concealing undisclosed mysteries. Andre, a herald of myths, was 16 years old. He was a member of one of the 3 extraordinary races and possessed the ability to acquire fragments of myths from enigmatic realms scattered across the globe, utilizing the diverse powers encapsulated within those fragments, which were documented in the Compendium of Legends for combat. His might and swiftness were rated D, his spirit was assessed as C, and his initial ranking was D+. The background of this other character revealed that he had resided in the capital of Denmark since his youth and had always been captivated by legends and wonders from around the globe, harboring a mysterious enthusiasm for remarkable escapades. One morning, he received a summons from the miniature garden on the Whale, unlocking the gateway to the realm of the Heralds of Myths. The system proclaimed that he was required to select one of the 2 identity documents presented above, which would act as his initial persona and make its entrance on the platform referred to as the real world. Mingwan beamed and selected Gu Wenyu. The system recognized that he had opted for the esper named Gu Wenyu and notified him that he was now required to choose one of 3 development trajectories. The initial aspiration was to transform into a hero, the subsequent one was to evolve into a villain, and the final option was to assume the role of a neutral figure. The main character believed that he would encounter significant difficulties regardless of whether he embraced the path of a hero or a villain. Thus, he opted to select the 3rd route and maintain impartiality. The system commenced creating a distinctive character development technique. Subsequently, it initiated the manifestation of that character in the real world, rendering his existence credible. The main character contemplated his abduction from an orphanage in Jing and recognized that if the game's interpretation of Jing mirrored reality, he could potentially leverage that persona to probe into the organization responsible for his kidnapping. As a dispassionate figure navigating the realms of virtue and vice, his prospects of acquiring pertinent intelligence would be significantly enhanced. As soon as everything was prepared, the apparatus initiated the countdown, and unexpectedly, all aspects transformed. The main character witnessed an intensely luminous burst and started to awaken, pondering if it might be daylight. The moment he glanced around, he recognized that he was within a classroom, captivated by his surroundings. He strolled to the window and came to understand that this was the external realm and that he may have genuinely evaded capture. While he appreciated the scenery, his closest companion, Lai Kingping, inquired if he would be interested in visiting his residence. Abruptly, the main character started to suffer from a severe migraine, and the system indicated that it was retrieving the character's past memories. A vast influx of recollections was on the verge of overwhelming his consciousness, prompting him to brace himself mentally. The moment the recollections started flooding in, his migraine intensified significantly, and his companion inquired if he was fine. As the recollections concluded their loading process, the migraine started to diminish. When you clarified that it was merely a trivial matter, mentioning that he had dozed off longer than intended and was experiencing slight discomfort in his head, he rejected the invitation as he had some affairs to attend to and assured that he would visit his residence another occasion. He ascended the staircase and ascended to the school rooftop, rejoicing as he had at last attained his freedom. The atmosphere, the warmth, everything felt genuine and not just an illusion. Gazing across the metropolis, he comprehended that this was indeed unfolding and that he had successfully harnessed his esper abilities to return, although he remained uncertain whether his actions constituted possession or fabrication. Perhaps he had forcibly embedded an individual into the timeline of existence. The butterfly effect represented a minor alteration capable of triggering a monumental series of reactions globally, and the capacity to influence the entire world in such a fashion was extraordinarily potent. He could now comprehend that the institution had not been overstating, for if they uncovered this, his original form would likely be prohibited from ever stepping outside the laboratory again. Based on his recollections, the strength of that form appeared to be comprised of ebony restraint bands that could assume any form he wished around his physique. He endeavored to explore more deeply with his skills, and succeeded in molding the dark strands into a network, permitting himself to soar through the atmosphere akin to Spider-Man. A few individuals on the ground believed they had observed an unidentified flying object soaring by them. In the meantime, the main character persisted in reveling in his newfound abilities, and even though the power was referred to as dark confinement bands, he perceived it as fundamentally an amalgamation of Spider-Man and Venom. He traveled to the children's home and was astonished to discover that the location genuinely existed there. He recalled gazing out at that metropolis innumerable times from the orphanage loft, envisioning what the external realm might be like, yet he had never ventured a single step beyond that location. Shortly thereafter, he ultimately reaches the residence associated with that unfamiliar physique, yet even thus Thus, the term home continues to seem slightly odd to him, as cohabiting with a family is an experience foreign to someone who has not encountered it in quite a while. Based on the recollections he had gathered, the structure of the family was quite straightforward. It consisted of a father, a mother, an elder sibling, a younger sister, and himself. Nevertheless, a calamity had transpired 5 years prior. His mother, Su Ying, had been inadvertently slain by the Iris Wings, a prestigious esper group operating under the jurisdiction of the United Nations. Subsequently, numerous resources were withheld from his father, who increasingly descended into a state of hopelessness. He had not come back to his residence for 2 years, but that simplified matters since, with both his father and mother absent from the home, the only individuals he had to contend with at that moment were his elder brother, Gu Maianai, and his younger sister, Su Zimai. Prior to unlocking the entrance, however, he observed something materializing before him. Upon his nearness to it, a display panel materializes, and he speculates that it could be the configuration settings interface. It encompassed diverse elements of information. He had the ability to reach the attribute interface and the task interface, receive notifications whenever there were outstanding missions, refer to a specialized growth system for the character, and utilize numerous additional features. As he was scrutinizing those matters, his elder sibling swung open the door and remarked that he had been anticipating his arrival for quite some time, yet he remained outside with a silly look on his countenance. At that instant, however, 4 tasks manifested before him to uncover what his sister, his closest companion, his father, and his brother were genuinely concealing. Maianai invited him to enter, since the meal was prepared, and he had to consume it while it was still hot. Yet the main character gazed at his sibling's hand and observed that it was splattered with crimson, causing him to question if he had merely been preparing meals. He strolled over to the table, gazed at the cuisine, and mused that all the dishes appeared delectable. Maianai inquired if their sister would not be coming back with Wenyu. Yet the main character clarified that she had mentioned she would be staying overnight at a friend's residence, so there was no cause for concern. Nevertheless, he believed that this was simply what the previous occupant of that body's recollections indicated, as he remained oblivious to the secrets his sister was genuinely concealing. His elder sibling apologized, stating that he was fatigued and intended to retreat to his chamber for a bit of rest. The main character examined his skills. The initial aspect was obscurity. The restraint band's senses were secured. This capability enabled him to utilize his restraint bands to acquire vision and auditory perception by pressing them against obstacles like walls, floors, and various other surfaces. The secondary branch was mania. The restraint band enhancement was similarly secured. This capability amplified the utmost extension reach of his bands from 8 meters to 15 meters. The tertiary branch was perception. Restraint band perception was also secured by making contact with a human or humanoid adversary using a band. A multitude of data, characteristics, and abilities would manifest in his mind. Presently, he held one skill point which could be utilized to advance the skill tree. The main character reflected on it briefly and determined that the skill most tailored for surveillance, monitoring, and uncovering mysteries was the most fitting option for him. As he dined, a news broadcast initiated on the television. The segment announced that the peculiar operation codenamed Blue Ark had recently thwarted a crime perpetrated by espers at the Hainway edifice in the downtown area. The offender was the colossal figure known as Proof, who was sought after by the authorities and had already been dispatched to the Anomalous Association. The main character was aware that Anomalous was the moniker assigned to espers affiliated with sanctioned entities, who typically collaborated with the Regional Anomalous Association. Blue Ark, who had emerged on television, was undeniably among Lai Jing's most exceptional anomalies, which implied there was a chance that the entity responsible for seizing his initial form for examination was the Anomalous Consortium. The main character resolved that he could not afford to squander any time and allocated his skill point to the stealth category. Consequently, he acquired the ability to moderate his senses and received authorization to master the subsequent skill within the stealth category. He assessed his capacity and discovered that every aspect of the chamber was flawlessly imprinted in his memory, enabling him to observe any sight he desired with just a single thought. Nonetheless, the system abruptly manifested and notified him that he had acquired mission rewards: 1 division point, 1 skill point, and 1 attribute point. By gathering a specific quantity of division points, he could forge a new game character in the tangible realm. The skill point could be utilized to enhance the skill tree, whereas the attribute point could be employed to augment one of the attributes on the character interface. The main character became enthusiastic about the separation points and recognized that he would seemingly have the capability to manage multiple characters simultaneously in the future. As he focused on harnessing his powers, the main character intercepted a communication alerting Blue Ark of a new assignment due to a felon known as Greenwing being present at the town square. He perceived it as resembling a radio broadcast and understood that it was emanating from his elder sibling's chamber. Within the chamber, the main character's sibling expressed dissatisfaction about being assigned yet another task because he had recently faced off against a lawbreaker and come back home wounded to recuperate. Evidently, he was Bluark. The device in his ear underscored that he possessed numerous adversaries and that his attendance had been expressly requested by Greenwing due to the perpetrator had seized multiple captives and insisted that Bluark make an appearance. For every 10 minutes of postponement, one captive would be eliminated, with no alternative. Mayan ye metamorphosed. The main character, having comprehended everything, simply inhaled deeply. The organization persistently urged Bluark to expedite their actions, as the death of a hostage captured on film could potentially obliterate their entire image. Bluark stated that he comprehended and vanished from his chamber, requesting the agency to extend the time frame as much as feasible to ensure that no one would be injured since he was already en route. The main character was astonished by his sibling's swiftness, as he remained remarkably quick even in a state of injury. It was hardly surprising that he was regarded as a prominent figure. The system declared that the primary mission had been accomplished since he had uncovered his brother's hidden truth. The mission had now been revised. He was required to forge a collaborative bond with his brother and broaden his connections within the anomalous association. Wen Yu felt quite discontent with this development, as the mission seemed intent on pulling him into the heart of that chaos. In the downtown area at 10:20 p.m., the Sentinels were apprehensive, as Bluark had yet to make his appearance. The offender was becoming progressively erratic, and the captive's predicament was deteriorating with each passing moment. The journalists declared that they were uncertain if the magnificent champion would succeed in reaching the destination punctually. In the meantime, atop the structure, the captives were filled with dread as numerous armed persons maintained watch over them. Greenwing started to lose tolerance, proclaiming that the renowned champion was still concealed, and that if he did not show himself within 10 seconds, the initial captive would be put to death. He initiated the countdown, and at the last moment, Bluark manifested in front of him. Greenwing finally noticed that the city's prince had made his entrance, perpetually in the spotlight and adored by all. Bluark urged him to cease the futile conversation and express his desires directly. Greenwing underscored that it was exceedingly straightforward. If the illustrious champion capitulated and accompanied him, every captive would be freed. Bluark proposed an alternative option. Initially, he would liberate all the captives, and subsequently, he would pummel those fools mercilessly. Greenwing expressed concerns regarding the alternative choice, as all the captives were equipped with explosives. Additionally, it remained uncertain whether the esteemed hero would be swift enough to reach the hostages prior to the assailants unleashing their fire. Even if he managed to subdue them in time, other conspirators concealed within the throng were armed with detonators. The instant they observed Bluark commencing his intervention, they would detonate the charges, resulting in the demise of all the hostages. Upon elucidating all of that, Greenwing remarked that the decision rested with the esteemed champion, for if he opted to eliminate him, the resultant collateral damage would simply be the demise of a handful of captives. This wouldn't pose a significant issue for the hero, as he had already witnessed innumerable lives lost. Thus, a few additional fatalities would scarcely alter the situation. Conversely, Bluark found himself in a tight spot. Had he not sustained injuries, he would have felt more assured in his ability to neutralize the explosives before that fool's associates could trigger them. However, that evening was unlike any other. He had just weathered a fierce confrontation and was both fatigued and hurt. As he contemplated his next move, a captive child cried out that he ought not to capitulate to those offenders. Greenwing instructed the captives to remain silent, frightening the unfortunate youngster. Greenwing announced that his tolerance had reached its limit, and that, since the protagonist continued to waver, he would permit his associates to trigger the explosives and make the choice on his behalf. Bluark called out for him to pause. Greenwing glanced at his associates and inquired about their activities, as none of them had shifted. Abruptly, however, one of the armaments dropped to the earth, and one of the offenders started to be elevated into the atmosphere by an unspecified force. In an instant, each of them fell under the protagonist's influence, while he was suspended in an inverted position. Gazing at all present, Greenwing is incensed upon witnessing all of that and inquires of Bluark if that lad is among his kin. He had previously cautioned them that if they attempted any devious acts, he would command his allies to trigger the explosives alongside the captives. Bluark clarifies that the young man is not accompanying him, yet Greenwing remains indifferent and asserts that he will inquire just once more. Commanding the protagonist to instruct that boy to depart, he threatens that otherwise, everyone will face destruction. Bluark reiterates that the boy is not in his company, and that no one can precisely identify who he is. The main character's present persona, a distinctive cultivation framework, is the social celebrity system. The fundamental principle of this system asserts that each time he forges a collaborative bond with additional superhuman entities, he can receive benefits via the exclusive cultivation mechanism. Even a social engagement task, which may appear straightforward to others, proves to be exceedingly challenging for the protagonist as he has never known a life of autonomy. The system further articulates that the cultivation task aimed at fostering a cordial partnership with an esper, regardless of their alignment towards good or evil, is currently underway, and the reward is a single attribute point. Greenwing informs the protagonist that his identity is of no consequence. He must depart at once or risk not only the detonation of the hostages, but also the annihilation of half the plaza. Nevertheless, the main character is intent on mastering the art of social interaction, and his initial approach involves emulating the behavior of the individual with whom he wishes to connect, adopting his target's mindset to foster rapport and minimize the gap between them. Whenever Yu believes he comprehends the situation and gazes at Greenwing, asserting that if he possesses sufficient courage, he ought to obliterate everything and everyone. Nevertheless, he would not be foolish enough to take that action because, if the captives perished, he would forfeit his leverage against them. At that juncture, which faction would find itself in a more disadvantaged position, as he would no longer possess any means of protection and would face direct assault. Greenwing is decidedly displeased with the trajectory of the dialogue, and once more commands the protagonist to liberate his subordinates or face severe consequences. When Yu contemplates that the next phase of social interaction involves meeting the other individual's needs to the greatest extent and appeasing them, he snaps his fingers, declaring that he will comply with the demand. He does, in fact, free the subordinates, but the outcome is far from agreeable in any way. When Yu inquires if he has not fulfilled his instructions and questions why Greenwing bears such an unsatisfied demeanor. He had liberated the remains of the subordinates, but retained their craniums. Even the mighty champion is astonished by such barbarity. Greenwing is also displeased and senses that the main character is confronting him. As Yu observes his adversary behaving peculiarly, he begins to suspect that he may have jeopardized his entire strategy. Nonetheless, the main character leisurely departs, contemplating that it might be wiser to let the issue rest, as antagonists are exceedingly challenging to engage with. He muses that it could be more advantageous to connect with individuals on the virtuous side instead. He disables his power, and one of the captives glances over her shoulder and is filled with dread upon witnessing the offender's heads upon the earth. As Yu grasps one of the firearms, he gazes at the captives and remarks that those offenders had been aiming their arms at them. He subsequently inquires if they are not incensed, as it is now their moment. The protagonist's intention is to reverse the situation, as this would be more equitable and would portray him as a champion of justice. Nonetheless, the woman grows increasingly terrified by the whole spectacle. The system generates a notification as the character's interpretation discrepancy escalates to 30%, and should it surpass 70%, there is a notable chance that the character will succumb to berserker mode. Venue is thoroughly perplexed as he cannot comprehend the reasons behind the woman's overwhelming terror. The system endeavors to assist him by providing a clue. The character that the protagonist embodies is designated as a gray figure, thus the approaches he employs should be more conciliatory. Otherwise, he will fail to gain the populace's confidence. When Yu perceives that mingling is exceedingly challenging and is uncertain about how to proceed, he may need to realign the offenders' heads to rectify the predicament. He reaffixes each of them to their figures, ensuring it appears as though the heads had never departed from their torsos. Nevertheless, when the captives observe that, they perceive it as even more peculiar, and the character analysis divergence increases to 40%. The main character attempts again, presenting the corpse of one of the offenders to the young girl, asserting that it was merely a holographic illusion and that the man's head was indeed still connected to his torso. If she doubts his words, she is welcome to inspect it, but as once he reveals the corpse to her, the head detaches in front of the young woman. As Yu nears the brink of transforming into an actual felon, driven by rage to eliminate everyone, he endeavors to clarify once more, but ultimately reveals the reality. It had merely been an incident, yet this time it would undoubtedly succeed. Blue Arc advances, seizes the protagonist's hand, and implores him to pause and clarify his true identity. When Yu articulates that he is simply a neutral entity who has no desire to be a champion and cannot be labeled as an antagonist, to put it more plainly, he wishes to remain unclassified by others, and irrespective of what others might express. Blue Arc must have faith in him, as they are destined to forge a strong friendship in the days ahead. Blue Arc states that the main character eradicated those offenders. When Yu is convinced he acted correctly and inquires if the esteemed champion would have felt content had the captives been put to death. Nonetheless, Blue Arc underscores that homicide remains homicide, and consequently, he must face legal repercussions. The main character perceives all of this as tedious, since he is convinced that the esteemed hero does not genuinely hold such beliefs and is merely uttering those phrases for the sake of the cameras. To engage in a more genuine discussion, they might convene in seclusion, allowing him to grasp Blue Arc's authentic sentiments. He discharges a modest quantity of energy within the champion, who effortlessly obstructs mocks it. Nevertheless, the main character had merely acted in jest and informs the illustrious champion that should he choose to encounter him, the choice rests solely with him. He subsequently leaps from the edifice. In reality, the assault was not designed to injure him, but T.O. Chinese letter, 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 signaling the path the remarkable champion ought to pursue. Greenwing exclaims that he has endured them for an excessively prolonged period and inquires if he has rendered himself invisible. Blue Arc cautions Greenwing that it would be prudent for him to capitulate, as the 5 Confederates concealed on the rooftop have already been apprehended by his comrades, rendering all the detonators inoperative. Additionally, the organization has encircled the entire vicinity, leaving him with no opportunity to flee. Greenwing maintains that he still possesses the captives, yet Blue Arc urges the offender to reconsider with greater scrutiny due to every captive has been successfully liberated. Soon after settling all matters, Blue Arc speeds towards the site, signaled by Wen Yu's skill, and promptly, upon his arrival, inquires the main character to reveal himself. Wen Yu emerges, fully aware that the illustrious champion would pursue him. Still bewildered, Blue Arc inquires once more about the protagonist's genuine intentions, as he does not aspire to be a hero, let alone a villain. Wen Yu highlights that this is due to his lack of a pseudonym or designation, yet he is confident that this will alter shortly, as that is the allure of being a public personality. Regardless of whether individuals admire or despise you, they will invariably bestow upon you some form of moniker. Nonetheless, it might be beneficial for the hero to exhibit a greater curiosity regarding the material the protagonist is engaging with. He presents an antique newspaper indicating that 5 years prior, a devastating incident transpired. A mother perished after being inadvertently hit by the peculiar organization. The unfortunate father litigated against the government multiple times without triumph and was unable to ascertain who had taken his wife's life. This was all due to the fact that the unusual entity was affiliated with the iris wings, and her identity was kept confidential. Wen Yu addresses Blue Arc by his true name, Yi. Moreover, inquired if he was merely 13 years of age at the moment when, just before his gaze, his mother was dismembered and transformed into a heap of remains. It was genuinely lamentable, for a youth devoid of a mother's affection is lacking, and he comprehended that reality more profoundly than anyone else. Consequently, he could assert with conviction that from that moment forward, Yi started to nurture animosity toward those anomalous individuals who exploited their authority under the guise of justice. That was the reason he had transformed into an anomaly himself. He aspired to acquire recognition within the unusual collective, depending on impeccable execution to be endorsed by the superiors, and thus joining the United Nations entity referred to as the Iris Wings. The entire endeavor was motivated by his quest to identify the individual accountable for devastating his mother as if she were merely a relative. Blue Arc starts to quiver, asserting that the protagonist is merely spouting nonsense. Nevertheless, Wen Yu clarifies that he has come to assist him and proposes that they collaborate, vowing to guide him into the Iris Wings to track down the individual accountable for the wrongful death of his mother. This would enable him to exact vengeance on his adversary. In exchange, Blue Arc would only be required to aid him with a single trivial issue. Blue Arc grows intrigued about what this could entail. However, the main character asserts that, for the time being, it would be wiser to maintain secrecy, as revealing it could potentially jeopardize Blue Arc's life. The protagonist also mentions that he will be quite engaged in that city in the coming days, and thus, he is relying on the esteemed hero's support. Prior to Wen Yu's departure, Blue Arc requests that he pause and inquires about how he unearthed his genuine identity. The main character chuckles and clarifies that the explanation is quite straightforward. He is able to perceive what exists beneath the facade of each individual. Blue Arc swiftly lunges at the main character, exclaiming that this entire situation is ridiculous and questioning if he genuinely thinks he can't be halted at that moment. Nevertheless, the main character effortlessly evades the strike, despite its significant influence. Wen Yu arrives at the pinnacle of the lamppost and implores the esteemed champion not to exert himself excessively, as the injuries surrounding his torso and throat are profoundly grave. Consequently, it would be wiser to address these ailments beforehand. He subsequently takes his leave and vanishes entirely. The climate deteriorates and a formidable tempest commences. Blue Arc endures upright amidst the downpour, his palm oozing. After a while, returning to the main character's residence, Wen Yu has already returned to his chamber and observes that his close ally has yet to return. This is unexpected, as even with such severe wounds, he remains engaged in a quest. The system manifests and indicates that the subsequent stage of the primary objective is unfinished due to his inability to form a collaboration that would enable him to broaden his relationships within the anomalous association. Wen Yu had anticipated this, as earning his brother's trust at this juncture was virtually unfeasible. Nevertheless, not all efforts had been fruitless, as the initial stage of the primary objective, which involved probing into his siblings' hidden matters, had been finalized. In recognition, he was granted 1 point in every category. The main character gazes at the system, contemplating what sort of moniker the public will bestow upon him, wishing it won't be something cliched, as had he anticipated this outcome, he would have selected a striking alias while he was in the plaza. As he possesses a single attribute point to allocate, he evaluates every alternative. Should he augment his strength attribute, his overall physical state will enhance, and the potency of his restraint bands will amplify. Conversely, if he opts to elevate his speed, both his instinctive reaction velocity and the swiftness of his bands will be improved. Should he allocate a point to spirit, his metaphysical strength and the resilience of his binding restraints will enhance. When you recalls that in the realm of martial arts, velocity holds paramount importance, so he may opt for the agility attribute. By doing so, he could strive to launch his attack first in battle, while also evading being vanquished in an instant. Upon selecting velocity, he navigates to his abilities framework, analyzes the accessible alternatives, and believes that the constraint band mantra can compel others to reveal the truth, operating similarly to a lie detector. Conversely, constraint band detection enables him to gather insights about an adversary's skills by striking them with a band. Regarding the extension of the restraint band, it is clear that the frenzy branch emphasizes augmenting combat strength. At this juncture, his primary concern is not amplifying his physical power, but rather acquiring the resources necessary for survival and uncovering leads. He chooses to allocate his skill point to detection, and now, each time he engages with an adversary, he can perceive their characteristics and capabilities. His skills start to advance, and the system declares that restraint band suppression has been initiated. Upon fastening a transcendent entity with a restraint, he can momentarily inhibit their extraordinary powers. The main character believes that this could prove immensely advantageous, yet it remains uncertain how completely the subject must be immobilized, as he might confine their whole form or just a single portion of it. He believes there are numerous opportunities in that, following the acquisition of these skills, he will have to seek out a hapless individual to scrutinize the guidelines with greater precision. When you comprehend that he has the choice to develop a new persona. However, the moment he attempts to accomplish that, the system alerts him that his division advancement is insufficient, rendering it unfeasible to generate a new character. A total of 3 division points is necessary to create one, but he currently holds only 1. The main character believes that he requires merely 2 additional division points to develop another persona. Once he possesses 2 characters, he can attempt to initiate a confrontation with the orphanage while maintaining the other in reserve. As he contemplates this, he perceives a beam of light outside, indicating that his elder sibling has recently arrived. Prior to Manhwa being able to unlock the entrance, the main character reclines on the mattress and feigns slumber. Manhwa experiences a sense of release and questions if he had simply been envisioning scenarios. Returned to his former physique, a teacher approaches and inquires if he is keen on learning about some espers that have emerged outside. Nevertheless, the main character remains reclined. Abruptly, he starts to grin and acknowledges his teacher, expressing hopes for a pleasant evening. The teacher observes that he appears rather jovial, yet there is a matter he is curious about. How did the main character realize that it was already evening? Mingwen clarifies that he had no means of anticipating, yet his mentor consistently showed up at night to rouse him and irritate him. The teacher expresses regret, yet mentions that he merely intended to pose a single inquiry. He subsequently presents him with an image from that time and inquires if that individual is not himself. Mingwen is somewhat taken aback, but he swiftly navigates the predicament with his words, inquiring if he genuinely bears any likeness to such an unattractive individual and curious about what his name might be. The educator clarifies that, following an assembly of the general council outdoors, they opted to provisionally refer to the boy as Black Chrysalis. However, as soon as he glimpsed the young man's image, he promptly recalled the main character. Mingwen persists in making light of the circumstance, remarking that if his teacher intended to label him unattractive, he could straightforwardly express it, as he was equipped to manage such a direct affront. Nonetheless, the educator maintains a grave demeanor, elucidating that he had indicated the day before that, when the main character was merely a child, he enjoyed enveloping himself entirely in toilet paper in the restroom, and the orphanage caregiver had even captured a photograph to immortalize the occasion. Mingwen had previously clarified that it was merely a foolish mistake he had made in his youth and naivety. Nevertheless, as they were deliberating the issue, the protagonist expresses his continued confusion about why he remains detained and inquires whether that entire month has not sufficed to demonstrate that he is simply an average individual. The educator's demeanor shifts marginally as he remarks that Mingwen is incarcerated due to an individual forecasted that he would obliterate the whole planet. Mingwen begins to chuckle, inquiring whether that individual had indulged in too many American American films to suddenly start discussing the complete annihilation of the world, as dismantling the world was no simple feat. Moreover, he was unable to even obliterate the cell in which he was confined, as every attempt resulted in a jolt from the collar around his neck. Nonetheless, the instructor asserts that no one truly comprehends his potential. The protagonist demands to know who the deceiver was that propagated that entire tale, suggesting they could confront one another and resolve the matter. The instructor replies that, regrettably, this is unfeasible because the reality is that they would be unable to do so. This heightens the protagonist's curiosity, prompting him to inquire why they would be incapable of doing so. The mentor clarifies that they have never encountered that individual and are unaware of their identity. Nonetheless, this person has foreseen numerous occurrences with significant global implications, and on each occasion, events unfolded precisely as anticipated. While they have contributed to averting various calamities, they have never engaged directly with these events due to a lack of opportunity. Mingwen comprehends that the dialogue is genuinely solemn, as it marks the first occasion he has witnessed his mentor display such a serious demeanor. He is likely not being deceitful, indicating that Mingwen could indeed possess the potential to obliterate the world. Prior to departing, the educator mentions that Kong Yuling will arrive to see the protagonist in 5 minutes. Mingwen inquires if he is earnest. The educator responds affirmatively, indicating that he is indeed present, but mentions his intention to depart, granting the pair the opportunity to converse freely without concern for anyone in proximity. Once the educator departs, the main character reflects that it has been quite a while since he last encountered her. Abruptly, the barrier reveals itself, and she arrives, leaving him elated. They had initially encountered one another 3 years prior. He had discovered from the caregiver that a new arrival had joined the orphanage, and learned that she was an alarmingly pale, biracial girl who was also both deaf and mute. As a result of her presence, the caregiver instructed all the children to acquire sign language beforehand. A few of the youngsters struggled to remain seated and ultimately held her accountable, leading to a general dislike for her from the outset. She consistently donned a crumpled white linen frock and towed along a sketchbook with a pencil affixed to it. Consequently, everyone perceived her as remarkably odd. It was only afterwards that he realized she acted that way to allow herself to jot down her thoughts, alleviating others from the necessity of mastering sign language due to her, and ensuring she wouldn't become an encumbrance to anyone. Despite her tender age, she already exhibited a composed and stable demeanor, empathizing with others' emotions and striving not to inconvenience them. In contrast, he stood apart from the rest, consistently safeguarding her as if she were a member of his own kin. He was impulsive, fearless of creating chaos, and adored, leaping and bounding everywhere. This was due to the fact that he believed he, much like her, was also regarded as unusual in the perception of others. One day, the pair found themselves reclined on a rooftop, and the main character confided in her that the final occasion he had encountered his parents, they had confined him within a closet and instructed him to stay motionless and quiet, assuring him they would return shortly. In his youthful innocence, he had been so gullible that he accepted their words as fact. Even after being placed in the orphanage, he would still isolate himself like a fool, hoping that maybe his parents would return for him if he did. Regrettably, that never occurred. As he matured and no longer required their presence, he ceased to be concerned. Conversely, she was distinct. He yearned for her companionship because in her presence, he didn't have to feign or strive to satisfy anyone. This was the reason he desired to remain with her for eternity. Kong Yuling was gazing at him when she observed tears starting to cascade from the protagonist's eyes. She grazed his shoulder, and that was the moment she inquired if she could genuinely rely on him. It was the inaugural occasion he had ever felt the sensation of being essential to another person, and, with a grin upon his lips and affection in his soul, he vowed that he would forever shield her. Nevertheless, he initially sought to ascertain if she would forsake him as his guardians had. She inscribed in her journal that she would never forsake him. The pair clasped each other's hands, and a profound affection blossomed between them. In the current moment, the main character clasps her hands, elated to discover that she genuinely is Yuling, and feels content to recognize that she is thriving. Yuling's eyes brim with tears as she gazes at him, ecstatic to reunite with him once more. Abruptly, nonetheless, Mingwan Scala administers a potent electric jolt, resulting in his crumpling to the ground. A voice proclaims that bodily interaction is forbidden, and that, should it occur once more, he will be subjected to electric shock until he loses awareness. Yuling grows anxious and endeavors to reach out to him for assistance. However, the main character urges her to stay composed, assuring her that it won't be fatal. He has already experienced numerous shocks and has become accustomed to them. He inquires if anyone had instructed her to take action, like questioning him in return for permitting her to see him. Yuling reveals that they had requested her to discover what his extraordinary ability was. Mingwan Scala believes that regardless of her beauty, she remains profoundly innocent, as she will undoubtedly face consequences for her actions. Given that the teachers would never permit her to inquire share about his abilities so openly. In a bid to safeguard her, he stresses that despite her request, he would be unable to respond, as something that is non-existent truly does not exist. He reflects that this marks the first occasion in his life that he has deceived her, which leaves him feeling a tinge of remorse. However, if he discloses what his extraordinary ability entails, neither of them will ever be able to escape that location. Yuling merely inclines her head, notes that she comprehends, and observes. Slightly distressed, expresses that she longed for him immensely during that period. Ming-Wan Scala inhales deeply, while cherishing each moment of his cherished one's company. However, an educator arrives and declares that the visitation period has concluded and that she must depart. Immediately after her exit, the teacher notifies him that if he conducts himself properly, there is a possibility they could reunite later on. Having now encountered Yuling, he ought to trust that they have not caused her any injury. Ming-Wan Scala expresses that this is genuinely commendable, suggesting that they could almost be viewed as saints now since they confined a child there and took pride solely in the fact that they had not harmed her. Evidently, their ethical principles were remarkably adaptable. The teacher asserts that, in reality, had the main character not disclosed his age, he would have entirely overlooked the fact that Ming-Wan Scala was merely 12 years old, as he consistently conveyed the impression of feigning maturity. This is because no typical 12-year-old boy would ponder in such an introspective manner. Ming-Wan Scala poses a crucial inquiry for the educator. If they are already aware that he will annihilate the planet, why do they not just eradicate him at once? Theoretically speaking, if he genuinely wields such influence and spirals out of control later on, decimating the facility, they will lament not having taken action earlier. The teacher cuts to the chase and reveals the complete reality to him, elucidating that Spurs in a critical condition can unleash abilities that exceed their typical limits, which is the reason they have refrained from attempting to dispose of the protagonist. As no one is certain of the outcome should he approach death and his powers manifest, particularly if it were to be a control-oriented skill, it could potentially lead to the annihilation of the entire planet. Consequently, their only option is to strive to manage him. Ming-Wan Scala reclines on his bed and chuckles, finding comfort in the knowledge that they will not eradicate him, which enables him to slumber far more serenely. The teacher simply gazes at him and starts to depart, advising him to take some time to relax. Once the main character finds themselves in solitude, he resumes his persona, and the system declares that, owing to his heightened acclaim, the character's alias has been revised to Black Chrysalis. He is astonished that not even a mere half a day has elapsed, and yet he has already been assigned a code name. Nevertheless, he must proceed gradually. His primary goal is to ascertain the precise whereabouts of that laboratory and subsequently execute a rescue. His initial form and Yuling from that location without drawing excessive notice. However, should that strategy falter, for her benefit, he will eliminate anyone. He perceives an entity nearing and becomes aware that an individual is approaching. Prior to the door swinging open, he reclines once more and contemplates that possibly no one observed him in an upright position. However, his sibling is exceedingly annoyed, and the system declares that primary mission 3 is now underway, and that he needs to unveil what she is concealing. Upon his realization that she genuinely plans to strike him, when he straightens up and inquires what she believes she is up to. However, his sibling claims that he has ultimately roused from his slumber due to his excessive lethargy, and seemingly believes that rising at 3 p.m. is entirely reasonable. The main character recalls that, based on the recollections he acquired, his sibling is 16 years old and in her freshman year of secondary school, while he is 17 and in his sophomore year, on the verge of commencing his courses. His elder brother is 19 and in his freshman year of university. However, among the trio, he appears the most youthful, perhaps due to the frail demeanor he consistently exhibits. The explanation for his sister's surname being Su instead of Gu is that their guardians determined that their male offspring would adopt their father's surname, whereas their female offspring would inherit their mother's. She exits the chamber in annoyance as she wishes to avoid squandering any further moments on him. The news bulletins currently airing are all addressing the events that transpired in the Central Plaza the prior evening. They highlight that the enigmatic individual employed dark straps to apprehend 5 offenders and adeptly liberate 5 captives without inflicting any harm on bystanders during the operation. As per observers, the individual was entirely ensconced in dark binding straps, akin to an insect chrysalis hanging above an advertisement board. The unusual affiliation has already cordoned off the vicinity and is gathering and examining specimens of the leftover material. The organization's vice president declares that after an urgent gathering of the specialist committee and considering the traits and demeanor of the individual's abilities, he has been formally designated as Black Scorpion and provisionally categorized as a Level B observation subject. Wen Yu is taken aback to discover that espers are categorized into various tiers. He gazes at his sister and contemplates that as long as his brother remains absent from home, he will employ restraint band detection to unveil unveil her capabilities. This might enable him to fulfill the primary objective without delay. He focuses and endeavors to be as unobtrusive as possible, softly brushing her shoulder, yet the instant he does, a dense ambience envelops the space. Astonishing him, he attempts to hide his response and presents her with a beverage, yet he fails to comprehend why he felt such an intense perception of peril. Nonetheless, the primary objective still stands unfulfilled. Maybe that is due to the fact that he has not yet witnessed her wield her abilities firsthand, or due to his lingering doubts regarding her precise identity within the ranks of the demon slayers. He recalls that when he devised the game character, the system indicated that there existed 3 primary supernatural factions in the realm. At that moment, he had only encountered the Esper and Messenger of Legends races. However, it seems that the ultimate component of the enigma has now been discovered. The concluding mystical faction was the Exorcists. Manhwa steps into the chamber remarking that it is quite uncommon to witness the two of them in the same place simultaneously, and in order to fully embrace the moment, he will prepare dinner that evening. He requests they hold off on their enjoyment until after they have completed their meal. Wenyu gazes at his sibling since he had sustained grave wounds the night before, yet now he is acting as if nothing transpired. Clearly, Esper's healed from injuries remarkably swiftly, although it could also be that the organization's medical treatment was outstanding. Zemai reveals that their father mentioned he would arrive at the residence that evening, yet Manhwa is not fond of the notion and responds that if that individual wishes to appear, he is free to act as he desires. Zemai inquires of Wenyu if they are destined to clash once more, despite the fact that it has been 2 years since their last encounter. Nevertheless, the main character replies merely in a reflexive manner because he is examining additional issues. The United Nations had categorized Espers based on threat levels from most severe to least severe. The T0 classification represented the limited category. T1 indicated disaster tier. T2 denoted dragon tier. T3 signified leader tier. T4 referred to season tier. And T5 corresponded to benign tier. Innocuous tier designated for individuals whose skills were unable to inflict damage. Their autonomy was not curtailed by the governing bodies, allowing them to undertake the same roles as typical citizens. Proficient level signified overall competencies. The leader tier signified the pinnacle among Espers, whereas the dragon tier denoted the cornerstones of the anomalous association. The disaster tier comprised individuals from the iris wings. Only Espers who attained disaster tier status in the organization's assessment were qualified to be included on the iris wings candidate roster. Ultimately, there existed limited category Espers. As per the organization's data, merely 1 Esper of that classification had ever been recorded throughout history. Their demise had been verified, and their documentation was highly classified and could not be revealed. Wenyu believes that because there had only been a singular confined class Esper in existence, and that Esper is now deceased, the narrative might truly pertain to him. Ultimately, given the circumstances he was existing in within that facility, being alive or deceased was virtually indistinguishable. If the limited category Esper referenced on the official site was indeed him, it signified that the individuals in that laboratory genuinely were affiliated with the organization. If that were accurate, then the day he embarked on a conflict against the scientists in that facility would equate to proclaiming hostilities against the United Nations. When that transpired, the catastrophe tier Espers of the iris wings would undoubtedly arrive to menace him, and he was unable to confront all of them by himself. Consequently, he required a method to enlist that family as his followers. If he effectively leveraged that deceitful familial persona, it would be effortless to manipulate them. Moreover, due to their mother's passing, they already nurtured animosity towards the iris wings, facilitating the establishment of a cohesive alliance. Regarding his adversaries, they likely harbored combat capabilities that ought not to be undervalued. Manhwa, remaining wary of his sibling, inquires the main character if he remained at home for the whole night. Zemai takes the chance to highlight that she too believes her sibling is behaving rather unusually that day. Wenyu is astonished and ponders if they could doubt him. However, he affirms that he retired for the night right after completing his evening meal the prior night. Manhwa persists in probing him, inquiring if he detected any unusual sounds throughout the night. The main character feigns ignorance and questions whether an intruder infiltrated the residence. His sibling chooses to abandon the topic and advises him to dismiss what he has just learned. Nonetheless, Zemai continues to be skeptical and gazes intently at him. The main character inquires about the reason for her scrutinizing gaze. Zemai clarifies that he is being overly talkative because he typically expresses very little and frequently isolates himself in his room, leaving others unaware of his activities. Wenyu inquires if she would prefer him to head back to his chamber, but she expresses her discontent, noting that he slumbered the entire night and still wishes to retreat to his room to nap throughout the afternoon. Manhwa believes that occasionally venturing out and engaging in conversation conversation is beneficial for him and urges the protagonist not to adopt that elderly man's disposition, as he showed little concern for his own kin. He ought to reflect further on how their mother interacted with them, as the familial environment had been quite positive during that period. Wenyu contemplates that it might be wiser to converse a bit less, as he could inadvertently reveal too much about himself. Additionally, he was uncertain about the proper dynamics of interactions within a genuine family. Despite having regarded Yuling as a part of his family during all those years in the orphanage, their manner of interaction resembled that of close friends rather than that of relatives. Abruptly, a person raps on the entrance. Zemai visits to find out who it is. Upon opening it, she is taken aback and proclaims that their father has come. Wenyu gazes at him, and the system alerts him that the subsequent primary objective is to unveil what Gu Zhuowen is concealing. The main character keeps gazing at him, contemplating that this individual is his father. He observes that his siblings have their heads bowed and are not focused on the events unfolding. Thus, this presents his ideal chance. Nevertheless, prior to the protagonist's capability reaching Zhuowen, the individual perceives a malevolence and fearsome existence, swiftly pivots and seizes the main character's hand. Wenyu believes that this was not included in his strategy, and that experience evidently carried significant weight, as this individual was considerably more prudent than his sibling. Nevertheless, the system indicates that the requirement has been met. Contact the target's physique while the passive skill, restraint band detection, is in effect. Mayanai swiftly perceives the strained ambience and inquires about his father's intention behind those words. Wenyu informs his father that he was merely attempting to wipe away a bit of dirt from his shoulder. Zhuowen eases a bit and expresses regret to his son, clarifying that his response was influenced by 2 years of constant tension, which had drained his nerves and left him excessively sensitive. Even a light tap on the shoulder was sufficient to trigger an exaggerated reaction from him. Nonetheless, he remains unaware of what that peculiar feeling he experienced truly was. It was as if a serpent had abruptly sprung from the thicket and ascended onto his shoulder, its ethereal emerald eyes illuminating the shadows and penetrating every recess of his soul. Nonetheless, the occurrence was sufficient, and main mission 2 is marked as fulfilled. As a result, he once again earns 1 point in each classification, and main mission 2 is refreshed. He now needs to forge an alliance with the notorious villain Phantom Clock to broaden his connections within the realm of malevolent espers. Upon obtaining this revelation, the main character struggles to comprehend that Zhuowen is Phantom Clock. Several of Zhuowen's characteristics exceed rank A. He possesses the capability to construct a clock tower reaching a height of 3 meters and can make his shadow ascend from the earth. This shadow reflects the user's 3 primary traits and operates as a duplicate, with the sole distinction being its inability to stray too far from the original form. Every half-minute, the hand of the tower pivots randomly to one of the 12 hours. Depending on the hour it indicates, the tower bestows various ability effects upon Phantom Clock's shadow when. Do you recall that throughout the last 2 years, Phantom Clock exclusively targeted espers who misused their abilities and never harmed regular or innocent individuals? The organization had made numerous attempts to apprehend him, but had consistently failed, leaving behind a note each time. Prior to vanishing, he would declare that those ineffective individuals were unable to contend with him, thus requiring them to dispatch members of the Iris Wings in pursuit. At this moment, given that the main character is aware of the entire narrative, it is understandable that Phantom Clock had emphatically insisted on the organization dispatching members of the Iris Wings to detain him. The rationale behind his prolonged absence from home for 2 years was to position himself as bait, enticing the Iris Wings member responsible for his wife's demise, with the intention of exacting vengeance personally. Nevertheless, the most profound irony lies in the fact that his past deeds starkly contrast with those of his father. In his quest to identify the Iris Wings affiliate responsible for his mother's untimely demise, he opted to affiliate himself with the organization, transform into a formidable anomaly, secure a commendation to the Iris Wings, and pursue his adversary through lawful avenues. Although they share a father-son relationship, the duo made contrasting decisions in their quest for a common objective, resulting in them finding themselves on rival sides due to a harsh twist of destiny. They donned their disguises and clashed with one another like savage creatures ensnared within an arena. Mayanai persists in disputing with his father, imploring him not to introduce those dreadful behaviors into the home since he had disappeared for 2 years and displayed hubris upon his return. How could they ever place their trust in him again? For a brief instant, he believed that his father might have transformed, but he remained precisely as he had been since their mother's passing. He solely focused on the individual who was no longer present and never contemplated the extent of his children's anguish due to all that transpired. Mayanai inquires if his father had ever paused even a single time to reflect on the profound grief they too had experienced following their mother's passing. However, witnessing his his anguish. Each of them opted to conceal their own sorrow while he feigned indifference and regarded them as though they were unseen. He likely had no idea how many instances Zemai had wept after he departed without uttering a sound, or how many times she expressed her desire for her father to return home. Mayanai underscores that his most significant blunder was proclaiming to his sister that their father would eventually return, as individuals like him ought to devote their entire existence to clinging to the memory of someone who had passed. Given that the living relatives held no value for him, Juhyun attentively hears without uttering a single syllable, and once his offspring concludes, he simply inquires if he has already overlooked his mother. Mayanai erupts with fury at that inquiry, seizes his father, commands him to be quiet, and demands to know what he understands about all that they have been enduring. Upon observing that Zemai is starting to become anxious, and intervenes, instructing both of them to cease immediately. Their dispute prompts Zemai to flee from home. Thus, the main character instructs them to act appropriately while he steps outside in search of his sister. He is likewise exasperated, believing that the turmoil within that household is excessively severe and that he can scarcely endure it. Nonetheless, he can now seize the chance to advance to the subsequent phase of his strategy. He transmits a message to Mayanai inquiring if he currently acknowledges the information he received and whether he has possibly started to harbor a faint mistrust towards his own father. Mayanai is somewhat perplexed as he does not recognize the number and queries who is behind the message. When he replies that he will employ a name that might ring a bell, Obsidian Pupa, Mayanai inquires if he harbors any fear of his IP address being tracked. The main character reflects that, should he pursue that route, he would ultimately discover his own location. Nonetheless, Mayanai persists in the dialogue and concedes with the main character, as his father indeed appears rather peculiar. He then inquires about what secrets that elderly man might be concealing. When you stress that, as their collaboration advances a bit more, he will be capable of disclosing some information. Mayanai poses a remarkable inquiry, whether the main character is his father, when you are utterly astonished but responds that he is not. Remaining perplexed, his elder sibling endeavors to grasp precisely what the main character desires. When you mention that it is confidential, he must remember that they are not adversaries, for if the main character desired him as an adversary, he could effortlessly reveal his genuine identity, rendering his siblings his most significant vulnerability. Nevertheless, he chose not to do so. Mayanai concurs, and while he still harbors doubts about the trustworthiness of their partnership, he is convinced that from the standpoint of shared benefit, they can collaborate for the present. Consequently, the subsequent stage of the primary objective is finished, and the main character once more earns a point in every category. His objective is revised yet again, and he must undertake his inaugural partnership with his elder sibling to enhance their shared trust. Additionally, he now holds 3 division points and is capable of forming a new character. Zemai unexpectedly materializes and inquires about what has captivated him to such an extent. When you are surprised, but claims that it is of no significance because his elder sibling and father instructed him to go and locate her. Zemai inhales deeply and acknowledges that her sibling has genuinely transformed significantly, as she has never observed him displaying such concern previously. Nevertheless, he ought not to fret excessively. She requests him to come back home since she has no desire to return there again. A friend of hers is on the way to collect her, and she will reside at her friend's place. Wenyu expresses that the connection between the two appears rather peculiar, as she often spends the night at her companion's residence, suggesting they could be more than just friends. Zemai advises him to cease with the absurdity, clarifying that she is straight, and despite multiple girls having admitted their affections towards her, she has never experienced any romantic feelings for any of them. Wenyu persists in pursuing the topic and requests his sister to elaborate further on the identity of her companion. Abruptly, a woman rests a hand on the protagonist's shoulder and declares that she is Zemai's instructor, almost scaring him to his demise. Zemai presents the pair to one another, still astonished when you salute the educator, but contemplates that she might be a mentor among the exorcists. Keu Jun presents herself, mentioning that she is a companion of Zemai's and has already learned quite a bit about him. Wenyu seizes the moment, extends his hand in salutation, and presents himself as well. With that, the requirement is met, and contact with the intended subject's physique triggers the latent capability. All of Yujun's characteristics are rated above grade B, and she undoubtedly belongs to the exorcist lineage. Her present designation is second tier, with exorcist categories divided into 3 tiers overall: Celestial Impulse, Retro Monocle, Rarity, Class SS. A demon is presently tethered to this celestial impulse. The central character believes that, despite his lack of understanding regarding the nature of a celestial impulse, the details provided imply that this individual is a top-tier combatant among the exorcists. This clarifies the reason his sister refers to her instructor in such a manner. Nevertheless, she doesn't even approach the 2 behemoths residing within his home. He says goodbye to both of them, requesting Yujun to look after his sister carefully as he must head home to freshen up since he has plans to play games with his friends. The instructor assures him not to fret as she will look after Zemi diligently. The main character comes to the understanding that he has fulfilled the initial stage of the first 2 assignments, yet he has not succeeded in accomplishing the task of uncovering his sister's genuine identity. It is possible that this occurred because he quickly realized that his sibling was Blue Arc and that his progenitor was Phantom Clock. However, he remained unaware of his sister's precise identity as a demon hunter. This uncertainty was the reason the undertaking had failed, and it seemed he might need to carve out time to pursue the 2 of them. Yu-jun persists in gazing at him, pondering the peculiar feeling she experienced when she clasped his hand. Zemi observes that her instructor appears a bit anxious and inquires if something has occurred. Yu-jun simply remarks that her sibling appears quite exceptional. Zemi grows increasingly perplexed, yet her instructor is uncertain about the situation and thinks that she will only discover the truth by evaluating him. She initiates her power system apparition alongside the instructed demon and commands both of them to leave. Still perplexed, Zemi inquires of her instructor what might be so remarkable about her sibling and whether she had genuinely developed such an interest in him. Yu-jun is taken aback and inquires about Zemi's behavior, but she soon understands that Zemi seemingly remains unaware that her own sibling possesses Esper abilities. Nevertheless, she chooses not to clarify since there is no necessity to meddle in issues that do not pertain to her. The instructor shifts the topic and requests Zemi to gather her belongings and relocate with her, at least during the summer break, if she is unwilling to head back home. Zemi grows irritated with her instructor since her brother had just departed and she had already ceased her facade. Yu-jun fails to comprehend the issue with them being aware that Zemi resides with an elderly woman who smokes. Zemi merely disregards her and inquires whether the trained demon will transport them to Tokyo that evening. Her instructor responds affirmatively, mentioning that there are several matters she must negotiate with the Exorcist Association there. Zemi states that if that's the case, she wishes to have something to eat first, as her family began to argue before dinner was prepared. Returning to his chamber, when you commence allocating his characteristic points and access the character's abilities tree interface. At present, the sole recognized method to acquire division points is by finishing primary missions. After he generates his second character, he will eliminate the possibility of forfeiting his initial character and being devoid of any method to acquire division points. Consequently, even if the first character perishes, he can utilize the second one to persist in advancing and crafting additional characters. He is likely to resolve the matter with the director within 2 days. The educators successfully remove him from the orphanage without his awareness, indicating that the orphanage personnel must have been instrumental in the situation. Evidently, the individual overseeing the orphanage is the administrator. Therefore, that elderly gentleman should commence supplicating to whatever deity he worships. Should he be unable to deliver an adequate response, his life will be forfeited without delay. The system notifies him that he has 1 unallocated skill point remaining and can acquire the ability to alter the hue of his restraint bands, enabling them to assume an imperceptible state. By enveloping his own physique in the restraint bands, he can activate an invisibility mode. Nevertheless, should he come across an entity whose characteristics surpass his own in every aspect, there is a significant likelihood that he will be noticed when approaching within a specific range. When you consider that this skill will be exceedingly advantageous due to its worth in pursuit scenarios, he feels that he might be placing excessive emphasis on the stealth aspect, resulting in an uneven progression. Nevertheless, at this moment, this is the sole method for him to advance. Combat skills would serve no purpose in his present circumstances, since if the adversary is formidable, he would be unable to conquer them, and if the opponent is feeble, victory is assured regardless. Thus, he chooses to allocate his skill point to acquire the stealth capability of altering the hue of the restraint band. The system showcases the explanation. The restraint band trap establishes an entrapment composed of restraint bands at a designated site. Upon an adversary entering the vicinity, their legs will swiftly be ensnared and enveloped by the bands. Traps generated by this skill inherit the influences of abilities like restraint band perception and restraint band identification. When you are captivated by the portrayal, but regrettably, he has already exhausted his points. Nonetheless, the system introduces the societal celebrity framework. The primary principle of that character framework asserts that whenever he forges a collaborative bond with more elevated individuals, he can reap benefits through the special advancement system. However, the protagonist disregards all of this as it is nearly time to return to the opposite side, since his mentor is likely on the way to visit him once more, and this time he aspires to acquire additional valuable insights. The complete division mode is now operational, and following a 1-hour cooldown interval, the protagonist's awareness will be capable of commanding the game character's physique around the clock without the necessity of entering a slumber. Returned to his initial form, his teacher notifies him that they intend to permit Mingwen to engage with the the other kids, but the main character is unaware of the identities of those youngsters. The mentor proceeds to clarify that they are also confined in that place, thus they ought to foster a strong camaraderie. Mingwen inquires if he is genuinely untroubled by the possibility that they could unite and devise a getaway. Yet, the teacher is confident that there is no cause for concern since they comprehend the situations of all the children residing there, with the exception of the main character. Mingwen believes that he struggles to comprehend himself, let alone anyone else, but shifts the topic as his mentor had mentioned that he would elaborate further on the other two extraordinary factions. The educator concurs, as that is exactly the reason for his presence, to familiarize the protagonist with those two additional powers, given that the intelligence agents have started to doubt that he is genuinely an esper, and instead consider him to be a herald of myths or an exorcist. At that precise instant, the system declares that vital information has been unveiled, and that the more knowledge he holds regarding the superhuman perspective, the higher the likelihood of acquiring a character with enhanced initial attributes and superior potential. Currently, he is familiar with merely 40% of all matters pertaining to espers, 5% regarding exorcists, and 1% concerning the heralds of myths. The advancement in development will hinge solely on the significance of the acquired knowledge. Mingwen feels a sense of relief as he recognizes that he made a wise decision by postponing the creation of the new character. Otherwise, he would have lost out on a significant opportunity. By waiting to develop his character until after gathering all the insights he can from the instructor, he stands a chance to acquire one or two exceptionally unique character records. The educator inquires which topic he prefers to explore initially. However, prior to his selection, Mingwen experiences excruciating discomfort in his cranium, as if a spike is being driven into it. The system declares that full division mode has been initiated, granting him the ability to concurrently experience the viewpoints of his original form and all of his gaming personas. However, should he struggle to adjust to this mode, he has the option to disable it. Mingwen observes that his collar remains unresponsive, signifying that it continues to reflect no detection of esper abilities in the user. Nevertheless, he had anticipated this outcome, as his power likely could not be sensed by the collar. The educator perceives that something is amiss, yet the main character attempts to clarify that it is trivial. Having been confined there for an extended period with no activities, he dedicates a significant portion of his time to slumber, which has resulted in a sense of lightheadedness. He requests his instructor to start with the heralds of myth, as they appear to be somewhat more intriguing. The educator commences by stating that, in a distant past, there existed a whale in that realm, and concealed within its abdomen was Mingwen. Interjects and requests that he modify his tone and communicate in a typical manner, as he appears to be narrating a bedtime tale to a toddler. His mentor concurs and elaborates, clarifying that emissaries of mythology typically do not manifest in marketplaces or urban areas. Their refuge resides within the abdomen of a whale known as chickenau, and its colossal dimensions alone suffice to envision the immense expanse of the realm it contains. The whale's abdomen harbors a vast realm often referred to as the petite oasis within the whale. Within this oasis lie numerous gargantuan edifices, oceanic metropolises, and regal palaces, where the nobility of the heralds of fables dwells within those palatial confines. The main character disrupts the narrative once more, as he is indifferent to whether they reside within a whale, a shark, or even a mermaid. He seeks to understand what a herald of myths genuinely represents and what extraordinary powers they hold. The mentor elucidates that each envoy of myths awakens at a specific age and acquires their unique compendium of fables. This compendium assists them in discovering nearby hidden domains of lore, and concealed within those domains are shards of myth. Should they harness their prowess to vanquish a legend, they will acquire the associated shard. By utilizing the compendium, they unleash the legendary force that lingers within that shard. This is their method of combat. The main character requests his mentor to elaborate, inquiring about the precise purpose of the legendary remnants they gather while foraging through debris. The educator underscores that legend components are typically preserved within the catalog by the heralds of tales, and, based on the significance of each fragment, are categorized into 4 tiers: mythic, ancestral, folk, and ordinary. The most formidable is the mythological tier, which, as the title indicates, is intimately linked to legends from various cultures globally. Thus far, a mere handful of mythological tier remnants have surfaced throughout history, and based on historical accounts, only remnants associated with the following deities have been uncovered: Zeus, the chief of the gods; Yamada no Orochi, Ra, the sun deity; and Hades, sovereign of the netherworld. Mingwen indicates that he comprehends and requests the teacher to clarify the generational tier. The educator contends that the main character has likely encountered numerous tales from generational folklore, including figures like Santa Claus, the Titanic, and the Night Parade of 100 Demons. These narratives belong to the generational sphere. Such tales tales achieve legendary status after being transmitted orally. Wherever a legend is found, a remnant will remain, and bearers of legends can harness the essence of that legend from the remnant. At this moment, the most formidable bearers of legends are those who hold fragments of generational folklore. Each of them possesses the ability to revive the narrative itself. The educator asserts that this is so formidable that, should a courier happen to acquire a fragment of mythic proportions, it would be tantamount to seizing a fragment of an age-old god's strength. Obliterating a nation would simply be a question of time for them. The system documents all of this because a collection of vital details regarding the perspective of the heralds of myths has been acquired, resulting in the advancement of that character's worldview rising from 1% to 30%. Consequently, due to the enhanced advancement, the likelihood of producing a messenger of legends character with superior potential during the development phase has likewise escalated. The main character is astonished to observe that his progress has surged so swiftly, indicating that his mentor had indeed spoken the truth. He grabs the chance and asserts that after listening to that comprehensive account, the envoys of myths appear more perilous than he is. Nonetheless, his mentor contests this notion, as envoys of fables capable of vanquishing legendary figures of myth have infrequently emerged in the annals of history. Moreover, there exists a crucial distinction between the capability to annihilate the world and the ability to obliterate a nation. Mingwan believes he genuinely seems to be a lone harbinger of devastation, yet his mentor endeavors to convey that they are merely striving to assist him. The main character, however, inquires about the true identities of those attempting to assist him, as thus far he has only encountered his mentor and is completely unaware of their origins. His mentor elucidates that this must stay confidential for the time being. Nonetheless, Mingwan inquires if they are part of the anomalous coalition. The teacher underscores that their endeavors are significantly more perilous and honorable than those of the association, and that they furthermore do not align with the groups of the heralds of myths or the banishers. Mingwan had already anticipated that obtaining any details about them directly from the teacher would be virtually unfeasible. The educator states that it is now appropriate to wrap up the topic of legendary messengers and proceed with their discussion regarding the exorcists. However, at that instant, a declaration is made indicating that a calamity-level esper, designated as number 10-059, known as Ruri Urashihara, has sought a meeting with the educator, Ming. Wan is astonished to find that there exists another calamity-tier esper. Evidently, anyone who arrives in that location possesses exceptional strength, indicating that creatures are rampant. Moreover, it appears that he will be unable to gather any intelligence regarding the exorcists. His mentor bids him adieu, stating that he has certain obligations to address, but if the protagonist remains intrigued, he can provide further explanations during their next encounter. Mingwan believes that his arrangements are now nearly finished, with the exception of details regarding the exorcists. However, he already possesses a basic understanding of the other two races, and the likelihood of creating a character with significant potential should have risen substantially. He steps into the system zone, where he is inquired if he intends to utilize his allocation points to generate a new character. A die will subsequently be cast, and the main character must select a random digit between 1 and 6. Mingwan is somewhat astonished, but opts for the numeral 6. The die is cast and comes to rest on the precise figure he chose. The system commends him for triumphing in the dice game and notifies him that, as a prize, he will be granted one extra character record option in addition to the standard selections during this development phase. He must now choose one of 3 identity profiles to function as his second persona. The initial character is Nana Dzawa, aged 17. She is of Asian descent, classified as an esper, with all her characteristics rated C or above. Her history reveals that she is Japanese and that her father was slain after provoking the mafia. Due to her tender age, she was ultimately sold into kabukicho. However, before the direst events could unfold, she discovered her powers one night and resolved to harness her thorn abilities to seek vengeance against the mafia. The main character believes that, while he is open to portraying a female role if required, her history appears excessively intricate, making it preferable to defer her for the time being. His alternative choice is Al Pacino, a 25-year-old Caucasian belonging to the Messenger of Legends category, with all his characteristics at grade D. Nevertheless, he faces rejection, despite the protagonist's desire to develop a Messenger of Legends. Upon listening to his mentor's elucidation regarding that realm, this individual's fundamental traits appear dismal in comparison to the others. Abruptly, the system initiates, blinking crimson, and emits an alert. It has identified that the full division mode remains operational, and should the main character generate an additional persona, his awareness will concurrently shift between 3 forms, significantly heightening the feeling of being fragmented. Nevertheless, he can overlook the caution if he plans to disable the full division mode. Mingwan believes he only needs to manage 3 tasks simultaneously, and and that there is nothing to dread. If he cannot cope with something as straightforward as that, how will he ever assist his original form in fleeing, much less seek vengeance? Assured in his course of action, he uncovers his eyes to scrutinize the third character dossier. Abruptly, the system declares anew that an unusual character has surfaced among those created this round, and that this character falls within the exorcist classification. Ming Wan believes he might have been exceptionally fortunate, as an unusual figure emerged in exactly the domain he is least familiar with. The protagonist is Xia Pingzhu, aged 19. His physical prowess is classified as rank D, while his agility, spiritual capacity, and preliminary assessment are all categorized as rank C+. The exorcists represent one of the three principal superhuman factions, with their members possessing the ability to engage in combat utilizing a celestial force crystallized from soul fragments. With each rank advancement, they can forge a pact with a demon, resulting in the evolution of their celestial force. This character is presently a first-order exorcist, as the exorcists are categorized into a total of 3 orders. His heavenly motivation is chess, possessing an extraordinary rarity of SS among divine urges, and he has already established a pact with a shadow demon. The account emerges in front of the main character, and without a moment's hesitation, he selects that persona. The system proclaims that Pingzhu will manifest in the tangible realm as a secondary character within the game. Furthermore, Pingzhu offers 2 primary development trajectories to select from. The first principal path is Wild Hunt, while the second is Exorcist of Justice. Ming Wan believes that he must inevitably opt for the first one, as the title of the second choice has completely extinguished any inclination he had to pursue it. Once he selects the initial progression route, a distinct character evolution mechanism is established. He just has to bide his time briefly, as the second character is being birthed in the tangible realm, and their existence is being rendered credible. He is on the verge of reaching Tokyo, Japan, and the timer starts. Moments later, at 7:30 in Shiba Park, Minato, Tokyo, the main character is already immersed in his new persona. The system declares that it is retrieving the recollections of the secondary character, and that upon the conclusion of a 5-second countdown, these memories will be integrated into the protagonist's consciousness, requiring him to ready himself. Xia Pingzhu had served as a skilled exorcist for 2 years before retiring 2 years prior, following an incident in which his partner, the exorcist traffic light, annihilated all other members of their squad without any discernible motive, leaving only him unharmed. Soon thereafter, his own relatives were brutally murdered by the exorcist Jack. From that moment on, vengeance has become the singular objective of his existence. It required him a year to uncover that Jack was affiliated with the White Body Brigade, a coalition of 12 offenders made up of espers, heralds of myths, and exorcists who roam the globe pillaging, murdering, and perpetrating various heinous acts. To penetrate the brigade and probe into his adversary's genuine identity, Pingzhu reached out to its leader via the dark web and scheduled a rendezvous for the ensuing days. The main character believes that all is progressing smoothly, and that this animosity appears to have been conferred upon him by the divine. Based on the recollections of his new persona, the present origin of his powers comprises 4 chess pieces: king, queen, pawn, and rook. By utilizing each piece, he can manifest the respective type of unit into existence, and all of them follow his commands unconditionally. The purported celestial impulse is a singular armament of fate held by every exorcist. Exorcists are categorized into 3 distinct orders, and with each elevation in rank, they have the opportunity to establish a pact with a demon. Upon the formation of the agreement, that demon fuses with the celestial impulse and transforms into a crucial component of the armament. He enters a chamber. A woman swings the door open and inquires if he is the recent arrival. Pingzhu believes that these individuals are likely from the unit and responses that he is. The remaining 2 individuals present inquire of Lingyi if the visitor has arrived. A somewhat peculiar man remarks that the main character resembles the image precisely, and that he is seemingly the contender for the number 12 role, as the captain has shown interest in his skills and instructed them to come to assess him to determine if they would be pleased. The fair-haired gentleman invites him to step inside and proposes that they first exchange introductions, mentioning that he is the 11th member of An Lun's brigade. Robert subsequently presents himself, stating that he is the 7th member of the brigade and that everyone refers to him as Radish Head, so the protagonist is welcome to use that name too if they desire. Lingyi merely stays quiet and commences utilizing her talents, smoothly obliterating numerous sheets of paper prior to governing them. Pingzhu likewise presents himself, as he is present to take on the role of number 12, and Lun observes that it is nearly time to depart, but prior to they proceed, there are numerous tasks they must accomplish, as the commander instructed them to eliminate all individuals in the tavern. Several of those present aimed to take action at an auction scheduled for the following week, which clashed with the unit's objectives. The main character inquires if his entrance examination involves roaming around and eliminating everyone present, and Lun Lun clarifies that the situation is not straightforward, as this is just a trivial facet. If the captain's interest in him is authentic, eliminating those individuals does not even constitute a trial. He merely needs to contemplate which role will be the most effortless for him to assume. Pingju understands that the force of number 11 pertains to a slot machine, yet he remains unaware of its function. And Lun requests that everyone stay composed and expresses his intent to attempt to spin it once more to determine if he can spare them some exertion. However, when he performs, numerous missile icons emerge and he believes that the outcome is excessively noticeable. Robert creates a gateway and instructs the newcomer to step through, yet the main character exhibits a degree of skepticism. Lingyi cautions him that if he does not depart at once, he too will be propelled into the sky, and Lun advises him to unwind, as they are heading to a destination that promises to be more enjoyable. Still perplexed, the main character inquires if they were not meant to eliminate everyone in the tavern, and Lun simply grins and inquires about the topic of discussion, as all present have already perished. The gaming machine from before commences to convert and transforms into a projectile. Pingju has ultimately grasped and now comprehends the nature of number 11 capability. No, one individual in the tavern may have potentially endured, and that is far from everything. The passage where the venue was situated, along with likely the entire adjacent area, was also obliterated. Once they transport to a different site, the main character inquires why they have taken him to a deserted structure, and Lun clarifies that it is a business structure situated in Minato, Tokyo, and that following the demise of 2 workers due to fatigue resulting from excessive labor, the Japanese government compelled the firm to cease operations, rendering the building vacant. Pingju believes that the location exudes a profound sense of corporate servitude, and suspects there may even be some form of corporate malevolence residing within. Nevertheless, he inquires once more about their intentions in bringing him to that venue, and Lun inquires about the primary expertise of exorcists. Out of nowhere, a demon emerges, and number 11 clarifies that they will withdraw and observe Pingju combat the creature before evaluating his performance. Should more than 2 individuals express discontent with his performance, not only will the team dismiss him, but he will also be removed immediately. Upon elucidating all the details, number 11 declares that his adversary has already manifested and that he ought to proceed to acknowledge it. The system notifies him that the primary objective is to arrive at the assembly location and successfully complete the brigade's entrance examination. Evidently, he has no alternative but to embrace the challenge. The creature starts to metamorphose as it expresses a desire for additional leisure time. Number 11 elucidates that this is the main character's adversary, referred to as the wage-earning fiend. Simultaneously, it is likewise an aberration born from the bitterness of the 2 workers who perished there. Lingyi believes that this is merely a heap of absurdity, as no individual has ever encountered such a demon prior. Yet, number 11 merely desired to express it at least a single time. Pingju perceives that the creature appears in no way intimidating and simply exudes a deep sense of sorrow, causing him to contemplate the impact of corporate servitude on those individuals. During their existence, they had been compelled to labor extra hours and remain alert throughout the night, and even in death, they were required to manifest with a colossal coffee cup and a keyboard, serving as a repository of knowledge. It was utterly barbaric. Pingju unleashes his power and commands the creature to advance towards him. The moment the fiend rushes ahead while insisting on an increase, the main character readies himself for battle, as his recollections suggest that those fragments are intended for such a purpose. The creature's assault impacts the main character with immense strength, yet the keyboard shatters and he emerges unscathed. He ultimately comprehends the functionality of his skill. The fundamental chess component, referred to as the king, has been summoned. This piece lacks any offensive capability, yet as long as the king is present on the board, the protagonist is shielded by an enigmatic force that renders him invulnerable to all corporeal and psychological assaults. Thus, if an adversary desires to inflict damage upon him, they must first eliminate the king piece. And Lunes discovers the cosmic drive exceedingly captivating, and Lingyi consents, as she has never encountered anything akin to it. Robert finds it peculiar and comprehends the reason behind the captain's fascination with the young man. The fiend persists, assailing persistently, yet achieving nothing, occurs, and the main character observes that its endeavors are futile, astonishing the rest once more. Nevertheless, the creature alters its approach and hurls the coffee cup at the chess token. Pingju understands that he must safeguard the monarch, for if it is obliterated, his physique will be rendered utterly vulnerable. He calls forth the pawn chess piece. This piece exhibits rather mundane characteristics and capabilities, resembling a soldier brandishing a longsword whose motions are somewhat awkward, although it mitigates that shortcoming through overwhelming quantity. The pawn slices the coffee mug in 2 and confronts the beast, which endeavors to assault it once more. Nevertheless, the pawn swiftly retaliates and obliterates the creature's keyboard with a solitary blow. The conflict between them grew progressively more fervent, as both parties trade increasingly rapid strikes. Pingju is astonished that an individual pawn can already endure a direct confrontation with a demon of that caliber, and its strategic significance will undoubtedly be substantial once it is further enhanced. He employs an alternative chess piece, forming a formidable cannon. This fundamental piece is referred to as artillery, capable of launching projectiles with significant force, but necessitating a specific duration for reloading after each discharge. Pingju capitalizes on the creature's preoccupation with the pawn, and, striking it squarely, however, the fiend has yet to be entirely vanquished. The main character resolves that it would be more advantageous to conclude everything in one go and employs his queen. This is the most nimble of the four fundamental components. Her armaments include a short blade and a long blade, and only the monarch understands the reason behind the queen's exceptional prowess. The moment Pingju issues the order, the queen moves forward assertively. The creature endeavors to assault her, yet her velocity is remarkable, enabling her to evade the strike while simultaneously amputating its limb. She subsequently strikes again, cleaving the creature into numerous fragments. The mechanism computes the outcome and declares that he has recently vanquished a rank C demon. Consequently, the advancement of the second character's unique progression system, Winter of the Wild Hunt, has been refreshed. Nevertheless, the main character fails to comprehend the rationale behind the queen's assassin-like combat approach, and suspects there might be an issue with that divine instinct. Moreover, in accordance with the regulations of chess, should a pawn traverse to the far side of the board, it is permitted to metamorphose into a queen. Upon finishing the task, he gazes at the trio and inquires if he meets the criteria to become a member of the brigade. Lingyi supports his acceptance due to her perception of his ethereal drive as profoundly amusing. Number 11 also regards him as remarkably intriguing, having never encountered an exorcist of that nature previously. Moreover, the capability had piqued the captain's curiosity, leading him to cast his vote in favor of the protagonist's inclusion as well. Robert observes that despite the capacity for growth, the main character remains exceedingly feeble and is likely to perish if he continues to associate with them. Nonetheless, his opinion holds no significance as there are already 2 votes supporting the decision, rendering his vote inconsequential regardless of whether he chooses to vote in favor or against. And Loons clarifies that Robert might still thwart the main character from becoming a part of the brigade. However, in that situation, Pingju would ultimately need to perish. The pair persists in deliberating the issue, since the captain had commanded them to dispose of him promptly if they were not content. The main character grows anxious, yet Lingyi informs them to cease intimidating the newcomer, as the vote has concluded with a result of 2-0, indicating that he has formally become a member of the team. She retrieves the present dispatched by the captain and flings him a crow that perches on his palm. Lingyi clarifies that it represents the brigade's emblem and that he must decide where he prefers to position it, demonstrating that hers is situated on her shoulder. Pingju believes that his palm would serve as an exceptional location. The moment the raven metamorphoses into an ink design, number 11 greets the newly appointed number 12 and declares that the last position has been occupied. The remaining members do not possess temperaments as amiable as theirs, so he must exercise caution when interacting with them. The system declares that primary mission 1 has been fulfilled, and consequently, he has once more earned 1 point in every category. Nevertheless, the primary objective has been revised. He is now required to accompany the White Crow Brigade during its assault on Tokyo's clandestine auction on July 21st and endure the operation. Pingju believes that stealing from the auction does not appear excessively perilous, and that there is likely no one in Japan who can thwart the gang, so he simply needs to follow the group. And Loons declares that it is time to depart. The remaining members have not yet reached Tokyo, allowing them to dine first and then briefly diverge. Lingyi mentions that she is famished, and Robert clarifies that, fortunately, he has left ajar a gateway that leads straight to the noodle establishment they frequented previously. Number 11 now refers to the protagonist as number 12 and inquires about what he is anticipating. Now that he has joined the ensemble, he can ease his tension. The character's progression framework is Winter of the Wild Hunt. Its primary principle asserts that whenever the main character vanquishes an adequate quantity of demons and extraordinary entities, he is able to acquire benefits via the progression system. The initial assignment has been accomplished, as he was required to exterminate a rank C demon or superior, resulting in the acquisition of 1 attribute point. The advancement of the mission is linked to the cumulative count of demons vanquished. He has now progressed to development mission 2, where he must eliminate either 10 demons of rank C or above or 10 superhuman entities of rank C or greater to earn 1 additional point. He believes that this is quite straightforward, since he merely has to traverse eliminating creatures in conjunction with the squad. After all, they are a band of eccentrics. He gazes at his individual dashboard and contemplates that his designation will likely soon be revised to rank 12 of the White Crow Brigade. Regarding the skill tree, allocating his attribute points is relatively straightforward since this character is of the summoner variety, requiring no physical strength and primarily concentrating on agility and spirit. He allocates his attribute point to enhance his velocity and vitality, elevating both to tier B. As they depart, the main character observes that there are individuals trailing behind them, and the remaining trio observe the identical matter. Yu Jun emerges, stating that she arrived to probe the situation due to her perception of malevolent oscillation. However, it seems that someone had already addressed the issue on their behalf. Zimai inquires with her instructor if those individuals are also exorcists, but Yu Jun responds that they likely are not. Ping Zhu is astonished to find his sister and her instructor present. Robert observes that they seemingly have additional visitors apart from themselves. Ling Yi directly addresses the issue and inquires if they ought to remove those individuals. Number 11 chuckles since the guideline is evident. If they are observed, there is no option but to eliminate the witnesses. The main character believes that even though he is presently utilizing his second gaming avatar instead of his initial one, Ping Zhu's recollections suggest that he and Yu Jun encountered each other serendipitously 2 years prior. Both individuals hold SS rank celestial impulses and are ascending luminaries within the Chinese Exorcist Association, drawing attention wherever they appear. Consequently, it would be challenging for them to remain unfamiliar with one another. Nevertheless, the circumstances are rather intricate, as if his sister perishes in that location, his primary persona will forfeit a crucial sustainable development objective. Consequently, he must discover a means to extricate her safely without raising any doubts. Regarding Yu Jun, her survival or demise is of no interest to him. Ling Yi, who remains famished, asserts that they must swiftly dispose of those individuals so they can proceed to eat. Yu Jun instructs Zimai to step aside, as those individuals are on the verge of launching an assault. The main character advances toward Ling Yi and mentions that he recalls the lady with the hat. She is affiliated with the Exorcist Association and employs an antiquated monocle. Regarding the other girl, he admits he is unfamiliar with her and inquires if Ling Yi is acquainted with her. Upon listening to Ping Zhu's elucidation, number 11 recalls the lady as she is a highly renowned exorcist. The captain had encountered her previously and had even contemplated extending an invitation for her to join the team in the past. The main character inquires about the events that transpired, yet number 11 clarifies that the captain remained silent, although it seems she was indeed turned down. Subsequently, Yu Jun established an exorcist group known as the Phantom Train Brigade, likely inspired by her agreement with the locomotive demon. Ling Yi is rapidly losing her composure due to the excessive chatter and inquired whether they intend to remove those individuals or not. Robert believes it would be wiser to let the issue slide since the captain instructed them to avoid any disruptions prior to the auction's commencement. Additionally, engaging in conflict with those two would yield no benefits. Once the issue was resolved, they merely pivoted and departed to find something to dine on. However, the main character expresses that if they consent, he would be interested in attempting to battle that woman. And Loons informs the main character that he recognizes he has only recently become part of the group and is keen to demonstrate his value, yet engaging them in conflict would create a significant uproar. They must depart as they have other obligations to address and cannot risk inciting the captain's wrath. Ping Zhu readily agrees to this, as they are scheduled to pilfer the clandestine auction in a week's time. Number 11 confirms that this is precisely correct and that the genuine proceedings will commence at that point. Prior to crossing the threshold, Ping Zhu inquires if there will be any arrangements made in advance, but Loons clarifies that the captain typically notifies them merely 5 minutes prior to the commencement of an operation. Ping Zhu believes that this is the extent of his assistance for his sister. He persists in conversing with his fresh associate, inquiring why they two are so untroubled. However, number 11 clarifies that anyone among their ranks who falls short of that degree of proficiency has perished 10,000 times. Given that the captain is intrigued by the protagonist's skills, he earnestly wishes that Ping Zhu can match their pace and prolong his survival. Thus, he should avoid meeting the fate of the former number 12. Prior to the portal shutting, the main character glances at his sibling one final time, pondering what they are doing in that place. It seems they might be intending to participate in the auction, but considering his sister's present capabilities, if she becomes entangled in a confrontation of that magnitude, even with his efforts to penetrate the faction as an informant, he will be powerless to rescue her. Zimai is astonished to witness them effortlessly pivot and depart, questioning the origins of those individuals. Her instructor clarifies that they belonged to the White Crow Brigade, as she had previously viewed an image of one of them. The petite girl clad in a kimono was the young woman of Japan's Ie's household, and upon receiving an invitation from the captain of the brigade, she departed from her family and became part of the ensemble. Zimai grows increasingly terrified and inquires inquires if they had genuinely meant to eliminate them. Her commander responds affirmatively, yet she remains unaware of the reason behind their decision to refrain from taking action. Each individual within that faction possesses immense strength, and without adequate preparation, their chances of victory are minimal. Evidently, the apprehensions of the Japanese Exorcist Association were warranted. The squad was indeed present in Tokyo and had its sights set on the clandestine auction, collaboratively arranged by the association and various mob families. Zemi inquires if there remains an opportunity to exit the group, and inquires if they are genuinely prepared to embrace the responsibility of guaranteeing that the auction unfolds smoothly. Yu-jun believes that given their progress thus far, departing would be a significant squander. She must inform the association of the events that transpired, and it is likely that the Japanese counterpart will intensify the auction's security measures even more. Zemi believes her leader is losing their sanity and inquires about whom they might reach out to for assistance, as both exorcists and psychics in Japan are feeble, and very few individuals have adequate strength. Yu-jun concurs, but highlights that the Japanese Association can additionally seek support from adjacent nations and requests them to dispatch individuals like Blue Arc. Within the eatery, Lingyi presents a sheet of paper featuring the phone numbers of the other members and clarifies that they will reach out to them upon their arrival in Tokyo. Subsequently, each individual starts to part ways. The main character believes he will need to stay with that group of robbers for an extended period. The gang has a dreadful notoriety, and this might draw the notice of the Iris Wings. If he can acquire intelligence regarding the Iris Wings, even if it pertains to just one individual's esper capability, he will possess significant leverage in negotiations with Mayani. At that instant, nevertheless, he must locate a place for that individual to reside, prompting him to seek out any establishment that can host him for a brief period. A while later, within his hotel suite, he scrutinizes that character's talent progression framework. His initial branch is Multitude, enlisting minions, which necessitates a single skill point to acquire. His subsequent branch is Bravery, a peace-oriented evolution. The prerequisite for mastering it is to allocate a total of 3 skill points in alternative branches. His concluding branch is Essence, Demon Slayer, which demands 1 skill point. Pingju believes that regardless of how he assesses his alternatives, the initial choice is unquestionably the superior one. He masters the initial segment, obtaining authorization to advance to the subsequent phase, referred to as pawn training. Pawn training arms his pawns with protective barriers, enabling him to engage the shield block command during battle. Since acquiring this skill, he can now call forth 2 pawns at once. This provides him with a degree of comfort, as the capacity to summon additional pawns enhances the security of his front line. He examines the mission board and observes that his initial task grants him 3 proficiency points, 1 characteristic point, and 1 division point. This is the inaugural instance he has encountered a task that bestows such a multitude of skill points simultaneously. It could be an indication from the system highlighting the formidable challenge of enduring the assault on the auction. Regarding the secondary primary objective, Jack is a member of the brigade, so when everyone convenes, he will undoubtedly be able to advance on that mission. Subsequently, there exists an additional primary objective associated with his recollections. 2 years prior, amidst a mission with a quartet of operatives, his associate, the traffic light, abruptly lost control. It appeared to be overtaken by a savage murderer, gruesomely transforming the other 2 team members into mere pulps, leaving only the protagonist unscathed. Subsequently, the traffic light vanished for an extended period, later resurfacing as a creature adept at pursuing exorcists. Each time he perpetrated an offense, he positioned a hexagram alongside the corpse and inscribed a Latin expression adjacent to it, specifically Delita Salvifica, signifying the Salvation Society. The main character believes that the Salvation Society appears to be a highly formidable entity. However, at this moment, there is no urgency to take action. He simply needs to await the brigade's alert, allowing him to leave that physical form undisturbed in the hotel for a spell. With the second body now serving as a precaution, it's time to revert to character number 1 and explore the orphanage. This approach may enable him to gather some leads regarding the laboratory from the director. The moment he re-enters Wenyu's form, the system declares that he has finished primary mission 3, which involved probing into what his sister was concealing. The objective has been revised, and he is now required to cultivate a collaborative rapport with his sister, a participant in the Phantom Train Unit, to enhance his social ties within the exorcist organizations. He believes that accomplishing one of the primary objectives of the initial character by employing the secondary character was a brilliant decision. He had even contemplated utilizing Wenyu to track her or engage in a comparable action, but he never anticipated that he would bypass that phase altogether due to a fortunate turn of events. With the points he has recently acquired by accomplishing the mission, he chooses to allocate all of his resources to enhancing his speed and also masters the skill of restraint, event which prohibits inhibition. Once he chooses the capability, the system refreshes and notifies him that he is now authorized to acquire the subsequent skill in the treacherous branch. Esper ability theft. Utilizing this skill, following the application of restraint bands to secure an Esper, one can momentarily appropriate and preserve that Esper's power. The appropriated ability vanishes after being utilized a single time and functions at merely 50% of its initial potency, with its efficacy contingent on the user's characteristics. The maximum retention period is 24 hours. The main character is astounded by the capability and reflects that had he been aware of it sooner, he could have accessed that branch earlier. The system indicates that 9 division points are presently necessary to develop the subsequent game character. As he currently holds only 2 points, he must accumulate a total of 9 before he can construct his next character. Wenyu is astonished as the demand has unexpectedly escalated. Perhaps the system is concerned that he might develop schizophrenia due to having an excessive number of personas. The system identifies that the player has stayed in the same city for 3 days and reveals that the city's event cards have been activated. Occasionally, an event card may emerge at a random location within the city, and upon its completion, the player will obtain an event card. He will be capable of observing event card exclamation points shimmering in the sky over the metropolis. Thus, he will merely need to journey to the location beneath the emblem and seek the activation spot to initiate the event. The main character believes that there are now additional side quests and that everything is progressively resembling a video game. Nevertheless, upon scrutinizing the map further, he is astonished because the exclamation point is suspended above the orphanage library. During his time at the orphanage, it was his preferred spot, yet it was also home to the most enigmatic area within the entire establishment. The cellar, which was perpetually secured, featured an iron entrance equipped with multiple layers of padlocks. On one occasion, he successfully descended the staircase and attempted to force the iron door open in the shadows, but the principal caught him red-handed while instructing the janitors to clean the vicinity. As a consequence, he was restricted to the attic at the top of the library for 3 days. Subsequently, when the incident was addressed, the principal asserted that the subterranean area had been constructed as a wartime refuge, that it had remained sealed for an extended period, and that no one could ascertain how grimy it might be. Consequently, access was strictly prohibited to prevent anyone from acquiring any respiratory ailments. As Yu becomes progressively apprehensive, contemplating the faint chance that the facility housing his original form may be situated behind that entrance beneath the orphanage, and that he was never reassigned to any other location. Abruptly, a person raps on his chamber door. His elder sibling arrives and mentions that he will be journeying to Tokyo, Japan in a week. He had extended an invitation to Zemi, but she declined, so he is interested in finding out if the protagonist wishes to accompany him. The main character promptly agrees and assumes that his sibling is already in Japan, yet wishes to keep it a secret from everyone. Manhwa subsequently requests the protagonist to inquire with their father if he would be interested in accompanying him on a trip to Japan. When Yu dispatches a message to him, his father promptly responds that he too would like to attend. Manhwa stays quiet for a few moments, but ultimately consents and departs to reserve the tickets. He speculates that the United Nations dispatched the Iris Wings to seize the Phantom Clock, so if he temporarily vacates the city, there should not be any issues. Although he feels somewhat exasperated, it is a directive from the organization, thus he must collaborate with the Japanese Exorcist Association to safeguard the auction. In the meantime, within his chamber, the main character remains uncertain about the present circumstances. As his father and sibling prepare to journey to Tokyo, they are likely to encounter the squad during the bidding event and become entangled in the strife. This intensifies the protagonist's anxiety that his secondary character could be eliminated by his elder sibling, as that would prevent him from acquiring division points necessary to establish a new character. Nevertheless, he has a more pressing matter to attend to. He ventures into the downpour and reflects that it had been bright only a short while ago, yet abruptly it began to rain. Moments later, he gazes at the orphanage, but senses an ominous foreboding. Upon nearing the orphanage, the system identifies that Dragon Nation event card No. 1 has been triggered. He is required to investigate the basement of the orphanage's library. Wenyu silently steps into the library and advances towards the entrance. Upon unfastening the initial entrance, he readies himself to unseal the cellar doorway and ascertain if his conjecture was accurate. When he succeeds in unlocking, he observes an individual bound and gravely harmed. Wenyu identifies the individual. It is Zhu Yin. The system proclaims that the occurrence has been finalized and the prize acquired. The event card is avian in a confinement. The main character recalls that upon his initial arrival at the orphanage, he had encountered Zhu Yin multiple times. They would often sit side by side in a secluded area of the yard and read, gradually forming a friendship. Although their conversations were scarce, she was among the select few he genuinely regarded as a friend. However, after some time, she vanished unexpectedly. unexpectedly. Shortly thereafter, the sordid director notified the authorities of her vanishing. The police uncovered no leads, each inquiry yielded no results, and the case was ultimately dismissed. He becomes enraged because all the residents of the orphanage assumed that she had perished or been abducted by human traffickers, and he never envisioned that she could have been confined there throughout that duration. Only a single individual could have accomplished something of that nature, since only that individual held the key to the cellar, the director. In the interim, within the director's chamber, he is serenely gazing at his computer, yet in an instant, the main character emerges from behind him, entirely engulfed in fury. He seizes the director and commands him to disclose at once who abducted Ming Hyun and Yu Ling a month prior. The director attempts to convey that he is unaware. However, the main character asserts that if he is unaware, there exists a method to prompt his recollection. He employs his talent, compelling anyone subjected to it to speak solely the truth. The director states that the individuals accountable bore no discernible identifying characteristics, since their entire forms were concealed. The main character persists in applying more pressure and poses the inquiry once more. This time, the director is able to recall and states that the attire they donned underneath their coats featured an emblem. When you inquire about the nature of the emblem it represented, and the director requests him to free him so that he may illustrate it. Immediately after the director sketches the emblem, the main character instantly identifies it. It is the insignia of the Salvation Society. Perhaps the mentors originated from the group referred to as the Salvation Society. The main character persists with the questioning and inquires if all the surveillance recordings from the orphanage on that particular day have vanished. The administrator responds that they insisted on having everything erased, leaving him with no alternative. When you assert that the sordid swine likely garnered a considerable amount from those individuals, and the director concedes that he was compensated, this enraged the protagonist further. As for 200,000, the director bartered his own integrity, surrendering the orphanage children to individuals of questionable background, indifferent to their fate. He inquires whether the director experienced even a fleeting moment of remorse throughout his existence. Moreover, a young woman was confined in the cellar and subjected to daily torment. How could he articulate that? The director simply states that he erred and that the entirety of the blame rests upon him, but the main character insists, inquiring if he genuinely does not wish to clarify his position further. The director merely pleads for his survival. As you start to grin and express that he can pardon him, since there is no necessity to continue disputing with a lifeless individual, eliminating the director without a moment's hesitation. Having finished his task, the main character departs from the orphanage and transmits a communication to Blue Ark indicating that he requires assistance. He requests that Blue Ark visit the Holy Land Orphanage and gain access to the director's office, where a body will be located. Furthermore, he must assert that the director ended his own life. Blue Ark grows apprehensive and inquires if the protagonist has indeed taken a life. However, when you clarify that there is a young woman in the library's lower level and that upon observing her state, he will comprehend the necessity of the director's demise. Moreover, he can proceed to the site at once, and if he declines to assist, his true identity will be revealed to the public. Blue Ark insists that he will initially visit the site to assess the circumstances before determining whether to offer assistance. Should he find that there was no valid reason for the director's demise, he will refrain from aiding him, even at the expense of his own identity, as his fundamental belief is to reject collaboration with wrongdoers. When he consents, he requests that he locate a wonderful home for the girl in the basement, ensuring she can attend school like any typical child and receive the most suitable psychological support she might require. If she chooses to withdraw for some time, he should merely grant her the necessary distance and refrain from imposing himself. Most critically, he must ensure that she never approaches an orphanage again, as she has endured sufficient hardship, and shielding her from reminders of that location is the least they can provide. When you highlight that apart from Blue Ark, he is unaware of anyone else he can rely on in that city, making him the sole individual able to assist in a circumstance like this. He must escort the girl away, and as soon as the main character witnesses firsthand that she has truly healed, all will be well. If not, he will never absolve him. Blue Ark understands that the discussion has taken a grave turn and responds that even though he remains unaware of the details, he is on his way to the orphanage without delay when you are already consumed by animosity towards all things and individuals due to your experiences. Thus, the Salvation Society will become his forthcoming objective. Blue Ark swiftly proceeds to the children's home and, immediately upon his arrival and upon noticing the girl, he believes that the director was unworthy of continuing to exist. He grasps her hand and assures her that all is well now and that the wicked individual will never come back. Once in his chamber, as he gazes at the sketch created by the director, the design mirrors the emblem left by the unhinged exorcist's traffic signal each time he perpetrates his offenses. Whenever he takes a life, he inscribes a saying in Latin and leaves that mark in its wake. Most significant Significantly, his mentor had disclosed that they were not affiliated with the Anomalous League, the Exorcist Coalition, or the Heralds of Myth. Consequently, there was a substantial likelihood that they genuinely belonged to the entity referred to as the Salvation Society. To validate this, he needed to locate a traffic light, as he could leverage his skills to elicit details from him regarding the Salvation Society, its purpose, and potentially uncover the whereabouts of the group's headquarters. At that instant, all indications pointed to the Salvation Society having embedded informants within the Anomalous Association. Otherwise, how could one rationalize the swiftness with which they acquired information? Upon uncovering the lab's whereabouts, it would be simple to amass power and bide his time for the opportune moment. Nevertheless, operating solo would still fall short. He had to devise a strategy to leverage the Anomalous Coalition, the White Crow Syndicate, the Exorcist Guild, and even illicit factions to further his interests. At that instant, nonetheless, he had to ascertain the capabilities of the event card he had acquired. The system notifies him that the card is named Bird in a Cage. Whenever he endures an assault from a control-type power, he can utilize the card to liberate himself from its influence. However, if he chooses to sell it, he can trade it for a single skill point. He is astonished to find out that cards can be traded for skill points, yet he chooses to retain it for now as it could prove to be incredibly beneficial later on. Unexpectedly, the main character experiences an unsettling sensation and comes to the realization that something is occurring with his true form. He promptly reverts to it, and his mentor materializes once more. Mingwan inquires about his desires this time, as he had just drifted into slumber when the mentor re-emerged. Nevertheless, the educator simply gazes at the main character and states that their director has been murdered. Mingwan straightens up and feigns astonishment. The educator proceeds to elucidate that the event transpired that morning and that, based on the inquiry led by Commissioner Blue Arc of the Anomalous Association, the administrator ended his own life within the orphanage office at 8:30 a.m. The actions he had undertaken were publicly unveiled. Accounts asserted that he had confined an orphaned girl in the cellar for numerous years and had perpetrated numerous heinous acts against her. Now, the entire city was engaged in discourse about the incident. The main character persists in feigning and inquires about the name of the girl whom the director had confined. The teacher responds that her name was Zhu Yin, yet the main character remains unaware of how they uncovered that she was confined in the cellar. The educator clarifies that Blue Arc had received an unidentified phone call at that time, and it seems that the director himself had initiated the call. Nevertheless, upon his arrival at the office and discovering the director's lifeless body, he was bewildered by the situation. Prior to his passing, the director composed an unsubmitted confession email on the computer. In this message, he informed Blue Arc of the location where the girl was confined. Mingwan feels content, believing that his sibling possesses remarkable talent in crafting narratives and has flawlessly assisted in shaping their account of the events. The teacher observes that the main character appears a bit more jubilant and inquires if he is content or whether he is behaving in that manner due to the incident being related to him. Mingwan starts to chuckle, expressing that he would nearly prefer the occurrence to be connected to him. However, as he is confined there, he is unable to take any action. The educator ultimately concurs with that clarification. Mingwan shifts the topic, suggesting that rather than squandering time on that issue, they could converse about the exorcists since his mentor had yet to complete the tale. The teacher asserts that Mingwan has never encountered a fiend throughout his entire existence because the Dragon Realm boasts an exorcist squad acknowledged as the mightiest globally, referred to as the Lake Hunters. This group wields such immense power that every demon within the nation trembles at their presence, concealing themselves in the mountains and dense woodlands, too afraid to venture into the realm of humanity. Every cohort of the Lake Hunters comprises 4 individuals, each hailing from a venerable and formidable lineage. Every participant of the group is the most formidable exorcist chosen by the leaders of the 4 esteemed families from their present offspring. Mingwan inquires about the individuals comprising the present generation of the Lake Hunters. The mentor clarifies that the leader of this era is identified as Lin Xingxi, hailing from a family of lion dancers, and that his alias among the exorcists is likewise Lion Dancer. The main character is astonished, as that individual is likely the foremost exorcist on the planet. His mentor concurs, stating that, at least in official terms, he is regarded as the most powerful. This piques the protagonist's interest, prompting him to inquire about the divine impetus that man employs. The teacher clarifies that his heavenly motivation is the non-binfire Chillin head. It is described as a lion's head crafted from dragon bones salvaged from maritime wrecks in the Southern Ocean and volcanic glass, encapsulating 72 fire-bathed cloth amulets. Mingwan seeks to gather additional information and inquires about the other members of the Lake Hunters. The educator highlights that there is another highly renowned individual, a heir of the Juge lineage identified as Juge Tong, whose alias in the realm of exorcism exorcism is celestial mechanism Taoist. His lineage has consistently been a formidable exorcist dynasty, and its exorcism methodologies have been transmitted through the ages. Mingwan inquires if the historical figure Zhuge Liang was likewise an exorcist. The educator continues to clarify that practitioners of exorcism were not referred to by that title in antiquity, yet the historical figure Zhuge Liang was certainly a possessor of celestial energy. His heavenly motivation was the renowned seven-star lantern. Unlike espers, exorcists do not disclose their presence to the public. They intervene solely against demons that infiltrate the human realm or discipline exorcists who breach the regulations. The main character confesses his mild curiosity and inquires about which category of superhuman theoretically possesses the highest potential among exorcists, espers, and heralds of myths. The educator believes that historically they could have referred to the heralds of myths. Hypothetically, if an envoy of tales is privileged to be selected by a legendary figure of mythic stature, they will effectively acquire a fragment of a divine being's strength. Nevertheless, due to the protagonist's presence, the solution to that inquiry has become ambiguous. If Mingwan is an exorcist, then exorcists will possess the utmost threshold among human superhumans. If he is a harbinger of myths, then the harbingers of myths will attain the highest pinnacle. Similarly, if he is an esper, as the prediction suggests, then espers will have the utmost recognized threshold among superhumans. In summary, his presence unequivocally dictates the most formidable category of superhuman within the globe. The protagonist's mere existence disrupts the complete equilibrium of the power structure. Mingwan simply believes that they are attributing him with excessive honor, yet he is aware that, in reality, he embodies all three simultaneously. How will they characterize him upon uncovering the reality? The teacher states that he has additional issues to address, and that their discussion for the day has concluded. However, in 2 days, he will schedule a gathering so that Mingwan and Yuling can encounter the other children. The system recognizes that crucial details regarding the exorcist's perspective have been acquired. The advancement of the exorcist perspective sector has risen from 30% to 55%, and the worldview enhancement reward has been secured, awarding him 1 division point. Upon realizing that the evolution of his worldview also awards division points, he acknowledges the necessity of identifying optimal opportunities to enhance his comprehension of the aspects he still lacks. Returning to the metropolis, the main character is perusing a novel when he gets a notification from his companion, Kingping, inquiring if he would be interested in going out, as he is unaware of the events that have transpired in recent days due to the protagonist's neglect of his close companions. When you realize that the communication arrived at an opportune moment because he genuinely wished to uncover the nature of the creature his companion was. The pair visits the movie theater. Kingping notes that they have ultimately succeeded in gathering and accomplishing an activity together, as each time he extended an invitation to the protagonist, you simply feigned being unresponsive. Perhaps he was concealing a romantic partner. Abruptly, a significant alert emerges on the display, indicating that to guarantee the safety of all, inhabitants who spot someone dressed in attire similar to that of Black Chrysalis should vacate the area without delay. Kingping feels exhilarated every time he glimpses that ensemble, believing it to be astonishing. The main character feigns disinterest, remarking that his sister suggested the man resembled a colossal moth. Kingping believes the man is extraordinarily attractive. Moreover, as he perused a novel, he dispatched 5 felons and even left Blue Ark in awe. As Yu seizes the opportunity created by the diversion and applies his skill on his ally. Upon the revelation of the information, he is taken aback as everything. Many of his companions' qualities are rated above rank A, and he is part of the race of the Heralds of Legends. His proficiency is at grade A, which enables him to simultaneously bind no fewer than 5 legend fragments. A superior grade legend fragment is preserved in his collection, specifically the ancestral grade legend fragment named the Red Dragon of Wales. The main character is astonished by the immense strength of his companion, as all his qualities are exceptionally elevated, and he also wields a generational grade legend fragment, just 1 tier shy of mythical legends. Kingping inquires if the main character perceives Black Chrysalis attire as somewhat recognizable, as it closely resembles the ensemble they created collaboratively during their middle school years. Nevertheless, when Yu feigns ignorance regarding the subject, Kingping becomes furious, declaring that he is merely a friend in title because they had previously consented to have uniforms crafted in precisely that style if they ever unlock their esper abilities. Upon Yu's affirmative response, as he sincerely recalls that tale, his companion harbors hopes that he may one day also inherit the esper gene. When Yu cautions him that he should wish for his examination not to reveal him as an esper, or else he will establish multiple fraudulent profiles solely to complicate his life. Kingping simply chuckles since the main character is conversing as if he were on the verge of unlocking an esper power. Nonetheless, they ought to hasten as the film is about to commence. After After a while, the pair exits the theater, and Kingping remarks that the film was outstanding, suggesting they should plan to experience that again. He bids farewell to the main character, clarifying that he is returning home as he still requires sustenance. The moment he departs, Wenyu believes he must unveil the mystery his closest companion is concealing. On a relatively secluded isle, the main character observes his companion. He is unable to comprehend what Kingping intended to accomplish by going there alone at that late hour. Abruptly, the ocean water starts to act unusually, astonishing the main character, and the colossal whale he had been informed of materializes. The most colossal known organism on the planet is the blue whale, which attains a maximum length of 33 meters. However, that crimson whale was nearly 200 meters long and must have been the entity referred to by his mentor, the mythical whale Chickenau. The moment the whale parts its jaws, an elderly gentleman emerges. He inquires if Kingping is part of the elite group known as Red Dragon. Kingping inquires if the elderly gentleman is the new custodian of the entrance. Nabis presents himself and affirms his identity. With the oversight of the diminutive garden inside the whale now entrusted to him, he notes that the Red Dragon, serving as the vice captain of the royal team, has not revisited the garden for several months and inquires about the reason. Kingping clarifies that he has been exceedingly occupied with his academic pursuits and that there have been few issues within the garden recently, thus eliminating the necessity for his presence. The gatekeeper concurs, but mentions that whispers have started to spread, suggesting that the vice captain has become weary of the realm of the heralds of myths. Kingping inquires if he is obligated to offer an elucidation. Nabis goes on to explain that earlier that day, the second prince called back the Red Dragon so that in a few days he could join him at the auction in Tokyo, as there was something there that piqued his interest. Kingping inhales deeply, realizing that had he been aware it was an invitation from the second prince, he would have refrained from coming back. Nabis highlights that the second prince explicitly designated the Red Dragon to act as his protector. They had received information that various notorious rogues recognized in the common realm could potentially make an appearance at the Tokyo auction. Once the sentry relinquishes one of his cards, the main character observes that the whale starts to fade away. He observes numerous individuals strolling along the shore, yet they seem oblivious to the crimson whale, suggesting that the elderly man might have employed a form of visual camouflage. Within the cetacean, the Crimson Dragon inquires if the offenders they referenced were affiliated with the White Croppergate. The custodian affirms this and invites him to proceed, as the second prince has been anticipating his arrival at the palace for quite some time. The system declares that primary task 4 has been accomplished, as he uncovered the secret his closest companion was concealing. The assignment is revised, notifying him that he needs to forge a collaborative alliance with the deputy captain of the royal squad, Red Dragon, thus broadening his network within the garden. Upon recognizing that numerous influential figures will be present at the auction, it may be wise to consider departing from the group. The main character is now aware that his companion will act as the second prince's protector and join him at the clandestine auction. Were it just him, all would be well, as his friend's qualities closely resemble those of his father. And based on the Esper classification system, he is nearly at disaster level, although he still does not meet the iris wings as a benchmark. With the White Croppergate's strength, they ought to be capable of managing him effortlessly. The issue is that if his companion perishes in the conflict at the auction, his existing character will forfeit one of his primary objectives. Consequently, his alternative character has embarked on a dreadful beginning, as he can hardly defend himself while still needing to strive to preserve the lives of others. Should circumstances deteriorate further, his whole household might find themselves present at the auction. In that scenario, there would be no fewer than 3 persons at a moderate level of disaster: the mysterious entities of the Exorcist Association and the influence of the Japanese mafia at the site. The ultimate conclusion may already be clear. Either his supporting character will perish there, or his primary character will forfeit several key objectives, and neither scenario is especially favorable. Nevertheless, he chooses to postpone the issue, as there is nothing he can address at the moment. Once he arrives back at his residence, he obtains a communication from his elder sibling, indicating that the young girl salvaged from the orphanage cellar has already been placed in a secure environment. She is currently in the hospital undergoing medical treatment and psychological support daily, and he plans to see her following his work shift. Mingwan is rather taken aback, attempting to comprehend why his sibling is contacting him at that particular moment. Abruptly, Mayanu swings open the protagonist's bedroom window and inquires about his activities by the window and to whom he is conversing. The main character swiftly verbalizes his escape from the predicament, claiming that the communication was from his closest companion from school, Kingping. He had mentioned that he was waiting outside the edifice, so when he approached the window to check if he could spot him, he saw no one, and evidently, Kingping had simply been teasing his. The sibling acknowledges the clarification and remarks that, despite being summertime break, it is indeed quite late, thus he must must head indoors and rest. Due to his accolades, he succeeded in elevating his character's strength trait to rank B, and additionally utilized one skill point to acquire his new capability, Esper Power Theft. The system informs that the forthcoming skill in the formidable category is ready for acquisition, termed Capacity Enhancement, yet the protagonist opts to postpone it for another time as it is quite late and he requires rest. In the interim, within the confines of the laboratory, his mentor advances towards the protagonist's initial form and believes that the safeguards of the spiritual realm weaken during slumber. This is the ideal occasion for him, a psychological type Esper, to penetrate the protagonist's ethereal realm. In this manner, he will have the opportunity to reveal the mysteries that Mingwan has been concealing with such diligence. The moment he employs his skill, he is carried into the protagonist's ethereal realm and arrives straight within a library. Each individual's spiritual realm is segmented into 3 tiers, with their authentic subconscious self dwelling in the third. Once he discovers the genuine Mingwan, he will have the ability to unearth every secret the boy conceals. That vacant loft represents the outermost stratum of Mingwan's spiritual realm. As the teacher gazes through the pane, he observes the residents perched on a precipice. He travels there and enters a chamber. All is in chaos, with the term deceiver inscribed in multiple locations. He advances toward the closet and raps on the entrance. The main character expresses that he might enter, and upon his unsealing it, he perceives a youthful Mingwan encased in multiple layers of tissue paper. The teacher inquires about what he is doing concealed in that spot, for if all unfolds as anticipated, even the hero's genuine essence within his ethereal realm will respond to him. The youthful Mingwan recounts that his parents instructed him to conceal himself within the closet and remain there until their return. The teacher presents him with an image of Black Chrysalis, as an individual's genuine essence cannot hide anything from him. In earlier trials, he had already gathered the insights he sought from the authentic selves of numerous inmates. He inquires if the young hero recognizes the individual in the picture, but the youngster responds that he does not. The teacher attempts to approach, inquiring if he might escort him away from that place and whether he wishes to depart from the closet. At that precise instant, an immense power emerges abruptly, yet swiftly vanishes. The main character expresses that he wishes to remain. Somewhat taken aback, the educator remarks that it is acceptable, yet inquires if the young lad has ever contemplated the possibility that his parents may never come back. Mingwan simply asserts that they will return. The teacher challenges him, suggesting that they may not come back, yet the young boy reiterates that his parents assured him they would. The teacher claims that they were being untruthful and inquires if the young man is intrigued by Esper abilities, since if he acquires a superhuman ability, he could restore his father and mother without the need to keep anticipating their return. The main character merely states that he is unfamiliar with what an Esper ability entails and that his sole desire is for his parents to come back, but he is just an average individual. He inquires if, should the teacher have a supernatural ability, he could assist in restoring his parents. The educator is taken aback by the response, yet abruptly, all things start to quiver and a colossal bear materializes beside him. He acknowledges that the environment is growing precarious. The duration an individual can inhabit another's ethereal realm is constrained, and should they linger excessively, their psyche may become tainted and integrated, ultimately leading to the erosion of their authentic identity. Consequently, if he does not depart at once, it may soon be too late. Once the teacher vanishes, the main character starts to declare that he is departing, and an alternative manifestation of him emerges, as whenever, if the teacher lingers there much longer, he could risk being found. Everyone, if you appreciated the video, please give a thumbs up, share your thoughts, and subscribe to the channel to ensure you stay updated with fresh content. I appreciate it.